Hello, this is James Kelly, the host of Aspects of Writing. My show, Aspects of Writing, is designed to encourage, inspire, and inform writers of every genre, from novelists to writers for the television and motion picture industry, as well as for writers of newspapers and magazines. My guests are composed of seasoned writers and experts in the writing industry, as well as the up-and-coming writers of the future. This show explores the various aspects of writing, from getting your idea on paper, to editing, to publishing, acquiring an agent, and even how to fund your project. Aspects of Writing broadcasts live every other Monday at 9 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Las Vegas AM station KLAV 1230 on the dial. This show simultaneously broadcasts live worldwide on the internet at www.klav1230am.com. Aspects of Writing also rebroadcast every Wednesday worldwide at 8 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time on internet station vegasallnetradio.com. In addition, we stream live from the studio at Google+, WordPress, and Tumblr.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, and YouTube at Aspects of Writing. To learn more about my past guests and future shows lineup and highlights, you can go to www.aspectsofwriting.com. The following are my most recent 3 shows. I hope you enjoy listening as much as we had fun in the studio. Thank you from your host, James Kelly. The topic for the first show you are about to hear was preparing your work for print. We discussed choosing a title, cover design, ISBN, importance of a barcode, books in print, and a copyright. My guests were author, director, producer Don Lewis Barnhart and author Judy McFadden. Don was the director of such television shows as Benson, Mork and Mindy, and Saved by the Bell. In fact, Don directed over 200 episodes of Saved by the Bell. Don is also a novelist and scriptwriter in his own right. Judy McFadden is a first-time novelist with her work Life with Macduff, and is known as far away as Australia. This was truly a fun night, both before the show and during. I hope you enjoy.
Views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of KLAV.
Welcome to Aspects of Writing with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. The phone lines are open at 731-1230. That's 731-1230. Or toll free 1-866-820-KLAV. Now, let's get writing. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly. On the show tonight, my guests are author Judy McFadden and author, director, producer Don Lewis Barnhart. I will always start the show with a few fun facts. So we're going to start off. I'll read the first one. The first fact is best-selling novelist Pat Conroy self-published his first book, The Boo. He spent thousands on printing and promoting the book. Today, of course, his advances run much, much higher. Among his best-selling books are The Prince of Tides, The Great Santini, The Lords of Discipline, and The Water is Wide. Don, would you like to read the second one?
Well, sure, Jim. Yeah, thank you. I kind of like the idea of doing, as you call it, the few fun facts about famous writers and what they have done and how they got there. I think that's an interesting...
Thank you very much.
Well, you don't have to thank me. I'm just thanking you for being here. This is kind of a fun situation. Judy is nudging me over there. She wants to get on with it, so I will. The second fun fact that you have given me is American poet E.E. Cummings. He self-published, I might say, No Thanks, a volume of poetry which was financed by his mother. Now, see, if my mother were still alive, I'd call her up.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah, because I need help on the self-publishing routines. On the half-title page, Mr. Cummings was kind enough to acknowledge the 13 publishers who rejected that book, which, by the way, went on to be one of his classics, which I think we're going to discuss later on about being rejected and so forth. Okay.
Judy, would you like to take number 3?
I'll take number 3, and
All
I don't
right.
want Don to nudge me to get even now. William Shakespeare and Agatha Christie, and that's really a really good pair there, are tied as the best-selling fiction authors of all time, according to the September 15th, 2008 edition of the Times Online. It is estimated that they have sold over 4 billion copies of their books worldwide.
And I'd like to point out that's 4 billion copies each.
Ooh.
each.
Ooh.
I really had no idea. William Shakespeare, I had no idea Agatha Christie sold that many
Well, I'll
books.
catch them at some point.
Okay.
I'm right behind you, Judy.
I have a lot to catch up on. The fourth fact is, according to Wikipedia, which ranks him as 6th on the best-selling fiction authors of all time in any language, is author Sidney Sheldon. Sidney Sheldon's first sale as a writer was for a poem he sold for $5 at the age of 10. The Columbus Dispatch reported in their January 31st, 2007 edition, he was one of the world's most translated authors, selling more than 600 million books in 180 countries. Wikipedia goes on to say Sidney Sheldon authored 18 novels. He wrote over 200 television scripts, 25 motion pictures, and 6 Broadway plays. Among Sidney's accomplishments for which he created, co-produced, and wrote are the television series I Dream of Jeannie, The Patty Duke Show, and Heart to Heart. He wrote all but 24 scripts in the 5 years of I Dream of Jeannie was on the air. And I'm sure, Don, you can relate to all this having been a director yourself, because I know you direct over 400 episodes.
Well, yeah, and but not like this guy.
To write them is amazing. To write that many is amazing.
Well, it is amazing.
Yeah. Well, what was also interesting is that he used pseudonyms when he would write. He wrote under the name Mark Rowan, Alan Devon, and Christopher Galato. And he did this because he didn't want people to know that it was him writing. His explanation for that was that he did this because he felt his name was appearing too often in the credits as the creator, producer, and writer of the various television series on the air at the same time. I guess he thought people would get tired of seeing his name.
Well, people chalk it up to ego
Right.
a lot of times, and this man is obviously so accomplished and so talented. And, he was writing books and novels and stuff, and then all of a sudden, he's writing I Dream of Jeannie. Well, I mean, the status of Hollywood, no wonder he used pseudonyms, because the standard is a little bit less than writing a novel to write a television show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So maybe that was one of the reasons that he was using different names.
Yeah, and I actually had the honor and privilege of meeting him, and it was really an honor to meet him.
I bet it was.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Now, if you are just now turning in, you are listening to Aspects of Writing with myself, which is James Kelly, here on KLAV. Before we get into today's topic, preparing your work for print, I'd like to introduce my guests and let them tell you a little bit about themselves. My first guest is Judy McFadden. Judy, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Well, I am the author of Life with Macduff, Lessons Learned from a Therapy Dog. And it's about a 9-year journey with a unique, hilarious, and frustrating Scottish Terrier therapy dog, and the life lessons that he taught me along the way, during his life and after his death. He was very unique because he was a spirit dog, and he touched a lot of people and changed lives, and mine most of all. And I'm a coal miner's daughter. I was born and raised at Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and my background really had a lot to do with me actually writing the book, because I grew up in a background where all nationalities lived and worked together and helped each other, and I had a love of animals, particularly dogs. So when I grew up, I combined my love of animals and my desire to help people, and I became a Therapy Dog International volunteer.
Okay. Don, I'm going to have you introduce yourself. Don is Don Lewis Barnhart. His resume reads like a who's who in Hollywood. His latest book is The Sweet Talkers. Don, why don't you give us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a coal miner.
You're a coal miner.
Yeah.
Not the daughter.
No, I don't know how I got into the business, to tell you the truth. I mean, seriously, I had no aspirations to become a director, a writer, or anything. I mean, I just kind of went along with what was happening at that particular time in my life. I worked, going way, way, way back, I worked with Sinatra, and Sammy Davis Jr. used to bum cigarettes off of me because he liked the brand I was smoking. And, I hung out with those guys, but I was a punk. Don't get me wrong. I was not socially, with these folks. I was a punk. But I did work my way through that period of time and ended up as a disc jockey in the 60s, working, various stations. And I realized that I didn't have the talent to get to a #1 spot in L.A. radio.
Okay.
So I wrote a book about it called The Sweet Talkers. And the Sweet Talker is the disc jockey who's trying to manipulate his listeners to go on to buy the products and whatever. But it's a funny, laugh out loud, I hope, book kind of exposing the interacting of sleazy radio.
Oh, okay.
It's got and it's funny. It's got a kick to it. But then I got before writing this particular novel, I started. I was assistant director. I worked on General Hospital as a stage manager, and Sonny and Cher, and tons of others. And finally, there was an opening on Benson with Robert Guillaume, and I got a job as a director on that show, and went over to. When the show was ended, I took the tape and went over to Morcamendi. And Gary Marshall, who was a big shot of his own self, told me beforehand, he said, if you get yourself a job and you bring me the tape, I will hire you. I will give you a job. Well, I thought it was all BS. And I came back to him after the Benson episode and handed it to him, and he said, okay. And they maneuvered me back on Morcamendi. And I worked there. I was on that show for 4 years, and I ended up directing a few at the end. And I think I'm the only director that I know of that has directed Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Now
that had to be fun.
Well, not only was it fun, it was a kick in the pants, but you got to understand you're not really directing them. You don't direct.
They're directing you.
Well,
directing you.
kind of, yeah. I mean, a lot of times I went home and wept.
Oh, wow. I can
but they were nice, and it worked out fine, and And then I worked on Saved by the Bell for 8 seasons. And
yeah, you're actually on Wikipedia for that,
Oh,
really?
yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, he sure
Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah, Wikipedia.
Is that a name of a car? I have no idea. I have no idea what that is.
Don, we're going to have to update you on the internet here.
Okay, go ahead. Update me.
I'm going to ask a few questions, and you both have covered a little bit of this. But, Judy, what inspired you to write your first novel? What inspired you to write this book?
I didn't have a choice. I didn't
Okay.
have a choice. The something got in me, and it had to come out. And I actually woke up every morning at 4:20 with just ideas running around in my head about Macduff. And I would say I was going to get up the next morning and start to write, and I would forget them. So I thought, well, I'll have to write them, write them down. So I would turn the light on, write a sentence or two, get back in bed, have another thought, turn the light on, and I did that for a while, and then I got smart and got a little handheld recorder with a light on it.
Yeah.
And I thought I had it worked out, but I got up the next morning, and when I listened, it was like, what are you doing about me, Doug? So I couldn't, that was the end of that. But I literally had to write this book, and something came in and through me the whole process. And
Had you written anything prior to this?
I learned to write the book while I wrote the book, literally. I'm not saying that. I learned to write the book while I wrote the book. And anybody listening out there, if I did it, you can do it.
Now, you also self-published this book.
Yes, I did, because Dawn will probably tell you about the rejections from publishers. But when I finished my manuscript in mid-2008, the country was in the midst of a big, deep recession. And the publishers, Simon & Schuster and Random House, they were laying off. And the lead I had into Hardcourt, when I called, they told me, we're not accepting manuscripts. So I didn't have a choice. I knew I was not going to go through a traditional publisher. So I explored various aspects of self-publishing, vanity press, print on demand, and e-books. And then I decided to form my own company, Summit Mountain Publishing, and published it myself.
What advice would you give an author and a writer, up-and-coming author and writer, in trying to get into the business?
Well, one thing I think that you should get in with a writers group. I belong to the Henderson Writers Group, and
Okay.
there are people there when you have questions about things that you have no knowledge of. They're there to help you. So that's one thing. And the other thing is read books, well, I say I read books. I read books on how to write, because I didn't even remember when I started to write. I didn't know a transitive from an intransitive verb. The be verbs you're supposed to avoid, they weren't buzzing around anywhere in my head,
I think what's important here is, well, Go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and so my advice is it's easier, number one, if you learn about writing before you start to write the book the way I did. And secondly, align yourself with like-minded people, with people who are authors or aspiring authors.
I think that's what I was going to say, is that even if you're a journalist or you have a journalistic background or you've gone to college and studied, it's still important to be a part of a writer's group or someone that you can bounce your ideas off of. I know, Don, you have a son. I'm sure you bounce a lot of your ideas off of him. You need to have someone who's going to read your work, help you critique it.
Well, the Henderson Writers Group, when I started to write, every week I would go to the meeting and read a chapter or read and get critique back. And at the time that I started to write Life with Macduff back in 2007, there were people in the group that were published authors and really knowledgeable, and that helped me tremendously.
And where can people learn more about your book?
Well, on my website, www.lifewithmacduff.com, and if you go to Amazon.com, I checked before I came down, and I was told if you're at 500,000 on Amazon, you're pretty good, and I was 219,000.
Oh, good.
Wow, good
Yeah,
for you.
so but it's at Barnes and Noble. If it's not on the brick and mortar, you can get it online. It's at Borders in Australia if you want to get from there. Tower, Target, Sears even, believe it or not.
And the name of the book again?
Life with Macduff, Lessons Learned from a Therapy Dog.
By?
Judy McFadden.
All right.
Coal miner's daughter.
All right. Don, I'm going to ask you, and you've mentioned a little bit of your inspiration, but what really inspired you to write your first novel?
A screenplay that I wrote.
Okay.
And when I came up here from Los Angeles to live here and play golf and try to figure out what I wanted to do, when I left the show that I was working on, the excuse was, well, goodbye, folks, I'm going to go write. And, of course, everybody looked at me like I was nuts. You're going to go what? And I said, I'm going to go write. And they said, okay, well, gave me a going away party, and I came to Las Vegas and played golf and wrote. But I had written scripts before. They hadn't sold, but I had written screenplays before. And I had 5 or 6 of them. And I one day just went, wait a minute, nobody's going to buy my stuff. Because my age, they're looking for 23-year-old writers, action writers, and I don't do that. I write character stuff with comedy. Anyway, I looked at all my scripts, my screenplays, and I went, wait a minute, I like this one, I like the story in that one, I like the comedy in this one, and I like the characters in that one. So I started writing novels from the screenplays.
I think we talked about that earlier, that both of us, that's what I do as well. I
Sure.
usually will write the script and then I'll turn that into a novel.
Well, all of a sudden you realize that you can flesh it out and you can go wherever you want to go with it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. That was my first script. My first novel was based on one of the screenplays.
Why did you decide to self-publish?
Because, and this is could get into some stuff here.
Prepare yourself, folks.
We're sitting here waiting for this.
Prepare yourself, folks.
I have some venom that's been stashed in my back pockets for a long time about that. I sat at my home and I went through all the steps, went through the internet, went through all the steps trying to find out publishers and agents and producers of this kind of stuff. And I started sending out things to them, and I was stupid. I was kind of uneducated about how to do that, but I learned. I read about the query letters and all that kind of stuff, and so I manufactured as best I could the necessary ingredients to be able to, get some response. And I tried it with portions of the script, just a paragraph. I tried it with different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I sent out over close to 400 query letters of all types of format.
Mm-hmm.
And I got back 0.
Not even an answer of any kind?
I got back 0.
Wow.
And, that's a lie, Jimmy. I call you Jimmy now.
That's all right.
Because we're familiar with each other. I'm a coal miner. She's a coal miner's daughter. And so I figure I can call you Jimmy. If I'm in trouble, I say, hey, Jimmy, send down a rope.
That's right. That's what I'm here for.
Well, there you go. We all have some place to be. Anyway, I did get back about 2, I think. And they were, dear Don, thank you for your contribution. And it was a rejection.
Right. Yeah.
But after all that time and all that energy and all that stuff, I was so livid at the business that I almost gave it up. And I thought, no, screw it. My stuff is too good for that, to give it up that quickly. And I'm going to have to see it through. So my son, who is very educated and very smart in the publishing of his CDs, he's a stand-up comedian, so he puts out CDs to everywhere, and he's very good at it. And his wife, my daughter-in-law, she does the covers, the graphics, and she's very good at what she does. And so I, went and self-published. And I'm happy I did, my theory being that if somebody in the studio business or somebody in the publishing business goes and says, well, I'm going to try this book, because they do that. Right. They skim them, or they read them, or they have readers.
They have slush piles.
Oh,
correct.
Yeah. And I figured that maybe mine has a shot to be, and that's about the only chance I think I have at this stage. So
Huh?
I don't know if that
we'll
answers
see
your
if that
question.
works.
Pardon me?
Well, hopefully that will work.
Well,
then,
I'll call you, Jim, and then
Please
we'll have
yeah.
coffee, and I'll say it worked.
Am I invited to the premiere of this?
Absolutely,
okay,
first
all right,
row,
thank
center.
You. Thank you. What advice would you give? Kind of, you're giving advice on this. What would you advise an up-and-coming author or writer?
Can I go back into that publishing morons
Absolutely,
that will not do anything?
It is important. I think it is important.
Well, I think anybody listening to this says, well, who's this guy? Who does he think he is, when you just read something about Sidney Sheldon, who wrote millions of copies, sold millions of copies. And you say, well, who is this guy that's on the radio now giving us advice if he hasn't sold anything? My wife at one time said, if you haven't sold, it's a hobby. And I thought about that at great length, about what's important in my work. So I kind of made adjustments and kept my ego in check and say, well, okay, let's go forward. And I think I will not give it up. And I think that anybody listening would say, I'm not going to give it up either.
Well, and we mentioned 2 authors in the beginning, Pat Conroy and E. Cummings, who both self-published to get started. So, maybe there's more to that than people realize. I mean, I would never steer anyone away from trying to get published through a major publisher. I mean, that's great if you can accomplish that. But even Judy, we were talking earlier when we first came in the conference room, how difficult that is just to get the attention of a publisher. And it doesn't matter how great the query letter is. I mean,
especially when you're a first-time author.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I've written 4 books now, 4 novels, and they're all close to 400 words. Pages, words. That's an easy write, isn't it? Thank you very much. I'm done.
That would be a very short story.
Yeah, it's a tabloid if you ask me. But they're all 400-page novels, and a lot of work went into them. Unfortunately, I did not have an editor or one I could trust, and not having the ins to the major publishing houses. I was reticent and actually afraid of turning my book over to a student editor that may or may not know how I write. And Judy was saying she had to. She got up. She was spiritually.
It really was.
And she had this drive about this book that she had to write.
Right.
I had written all the screenplays before, so I knew where I was going.
Right.
But
well, and the point you were trying to make too is about with the editing process. Last show I had, we actually went into this in great detail, and it is interesting how each one of us had a different experience with our editors along the way. I really had horrible experiences in the beginning. I would go out and pay $2,000 for someone to do something and get it back. It was horrible. I'd go spend another $2,000 or $3,000 for someone to do it. It'd be horrible. My best experience has been I actually went to UNLV on one book and had a professor there edit it for me.
Good.
I mean, it
free?
Isn't always well, not free, but close to it though.
Well, I didn't have that experience because I have a secretarial background.
Okay.
And my grammar and spelling wasn't really bad. But I found that you get so close to it. I rewrote it like 4 times because, as I said, I literally learned how to write the book while I was writing the book. But you get so close to it and you look at it so many times until you can't see things. You kind of gloss over them. So I had really some people in the Henderson Writers Group did the editing on mine.
I would like to ask you, Don, where people can find your books as well.
Well, they're on Amazon and Kindle. They're at my website, which is www.donlewisbarnhart.com.
That's original, Don. That's original.
That's original.
DonLewisBarnhart.com. That's right.
Well, my son's name is Don Barnhart, and so he's on the web all over the map because of his comedy stuff. So I had to put Lewis in there. I had to put Lewis in there to keep it separate. The editing thing, you said you went through it 4 times and rewrote that book. I've gone through it, each book, at least 15 times, at least, maybe more. And I used to drive my mate, drive her nuts because I would say, I'm going under, which meant I'm writing. Don't bother me. And she would leave me alone, and I would write, and I would be in my 15th rewrite doing the comma patrol or doing the question mark patrol or doing the funny patrol.
Right, because you have to do one thing at a time.
Yeah, you really, well, then I'd start going off on tangents. All of a sudden,
You're writing more things.
And I'm saying, wait a minute, he should say this because it's funnier if he does that.
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, let's back up a bit.
You start writing again.
And you start and you write again, and then she would walk into the door, you want some dinner? I'd say, well, yeah, I do. But gee, I got this. I'm really staying under, babe. And she would go and leave me alone. But anyway, so that's.
We have a couple callers, but before we take the callers, I do want to touch on our topic tonight, which is preparing your work for print. We do need to let that's what we're here for tonight. Is that. The first thing that's important is choosing the title. The most important thing is to choose a title that it describes that book. Many publishers come up with cute, clever, and humorous titles, but the point is you need something that's going to give you some idea what that book is about. And I'm sure you both agree with me on that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, but what I find interesting, Judy, I don't know if you do or not. Of course, your book is set. I mean, that is a terrific title. I mean,
well, Dawn, let me tell you about that. I had struggled with the title all through that book. And when I finally finished the manuscript, I said, okay, I'm going to say it is Life with McDuff, Lessons Learned from a Therapy Dog. And then I said, you can't do that. That's a lie.
Oh, yeah.
Because you didn't put everything that happened in your life with McDuff. And in order to have that title, you have to go back and put some stuff in. And I went back and wrote the 5th chapter of that book because there were things in there that I didn't... you really expose yourself when you write the type of book that I did when you're writing about yourself and your life. And there were things, there was a domestic violence incident, there was something that occurred with a bright light, and I thought people were going to think you're a kook, you can't put this stuff in. And I ended up rewriting that chapter, so then I had my title.
But the most important thing is to remember that when you have a title, sometimes people will just come up with the title just because it's a clever title, and you can't really do that. It has to have something to do with what you're writing about.
Certainly.
That cover design, we talked about this earlier as well, Don. You have your daughter-in-law? Or?
My daughter-in-law is a graphic artist. She's also an artist of other things. She does paintings, and she's a therapist in the sense of physical therapy. She's taking Chao Tung Tao Sang Sua, which is a form of, and if anybody's listening,
did you pronounce that?
I just made that up.
I was getting ready to say, I was going to ask you, did you really know what you said?
No.
Okay.
And but she would, it was all that kung fu fighting stuff. She's only about 85 pounds, and she can whip any 4 of us in here.
Yeah.
I left you out, Judy, because
I'm a coal miner's daughter.
Well,
I'm
there
tough.
you go.
Right.
You
I'm
hit
tough.
her with a rock.
You can't whip me.
No, you hit her with a
There's
rock,
no
and that'll be
going
the end of
against
that. But the point being is that she was great. I mean, my covers I think look terrific, for what she's done.
Well, and Wikipedia states, book design is the art of incorporating the content, style, format, design, and sequence of various components of a book into a coherent whole. Morris Publishing suggests, and that's a pretty big publishing company, your cover is important to your book's success. Good design guides and motivates sales. An effective title, striking graphics, and interesting colors all contribute to the attractiveness of a cover.
Could I say something about the
Yes,
the
please.
cover? You've heard, don't judge a book by the cover. That doesn't work when you're doing a book. And I had a graphic designer that I met through the Henderson Writers Group at the Las Vegas Writers Conference, which is coming up next month, by the way. And that's another reason to belong to a writers group, because you get to go to things like that. But Sue Campbell of Sue Campbell Design, she did the cover and the interior work on my book. She does the book covers for Stevens Press. And she told me that she actually took hours to go over the coat of Macduff, because it's all black. And she said she took hours to do that. And the eyes of Macduff is very integral in the book. And I've had strangers comment to me about the eyes on the book. So she was very easy to work with, and we had differences, but that's one thing. If you do have a graphic designer, you have to be able to communicate.
One of the things we need to bring this up it's very important, is the ISBN. Now, Don, you cheated a little bit because you said your son helped you with this when you self-published.
So what?
Okay. But Judy,
sorry.
you know how important this is
Oh, yeah.
to make sure you have all your barcodes and everything correct on when you're self-publishing. And you really should know what those are even when you have a major publishing house do your book
Well,
for you.
the ISBN, that's International Standard Book Number. Why international, I don't know, because it's for the publishers in the United States. But Bowkers, Bowkers, you cannot go over, around, or beneath them. You have to go through Bowkers.
Right,
to get
even
that.
when it says ISBN.org, that's still our Bowker.
It's Bowkers. And what I found, that if you get on the internet and just go to their websites, and they're not as complicated as Don's. It's usually just www.bowkers.com.
Wait a minute.
What's
Judy.
coming about
What's all that
Don
about?
Lewis Barnhart?
I mean, you're jumping on me like fleas on a
But-
dog.
but
I mean, holy cow!
But I find that it's easy, because you just go, and there's usually frequently asked questions, and I used to just print that out and go from there. So it's not very hard.
Actually,
to do.
that's one of my suggestions is to go to ISBN.org, and it'll give you all that information you need about the ISBN. The ISBN is important because it tells you the purpose of it is to identify and distinguish you as a publisher, the title, the edition, the format, and the product. So you're that number, which is now a 13-digit number. It used to be 10. In 2007, they changed it to where it was a 13. And actually, for people who have a book that they want to revise and bring back, or if you're a publisher prior to 2007, you were probably given a list of, I have 100 ISBNs.
Yes, you can get that many.
You can actually take those 10-digit ISBN and go to ISBN.org and put that 10-digit in, and it will give you the 13-digit code that's the equivalent of that 10 now.
You can still use the 10, though.
Right, rather than, they prefer you to use the 13 and convert it. The 10 to the 13 is what they prefer.
And I think the listener should know that you need the ISBN in order to sell
In the
through
bookstores.
through the bookstores, and even online. You need it, and you also need it for a distributor to distribute your book. If you don't have
Right,
that.
and even online, there are some companies that will offer you with an ISBN. It's really better if you self-publish with your own ISBNs as opposed to going with them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you use your own.
We are going to take any callers that are online right now. If any questions, I believe we have Kenneth on the line.
Yes, how you doing?
Great.
Yeah, I just have one, I guess, general question. The program that Apple offers, the iBook Author, would you recommend using that particular tool to get your book, to actually put it together, I guess, as far as...
I'm not
I've heard a
familiar
lot
with
of
the iBook.
controversy.
I'm not that familiar with the iBook Author, to be honest with you.
Because, I know when it first came out, they talked about if you use the iBook Author to create your book, that you could only sell it through Apple through Apple's bookstore, and you couldn't sell it through the other mediums, such as Amazon and so on and so on. But
See,
I was just kind of wondering.
This is good to hear, because this is something I did not know. This is something maybe our listeners, I'll check into it for the next show and let them know about it.
Well, then they came back and they redid the wording, and then it kind of changed and kind of said that you can sell it through other mediums. But I was just curious to know, had anybody ever used it? If you knew anything about it, and would you recommend using?
I honestly know nothing about it. Now, is it like an ebook? Is that the setup or the premise, or is it a software where you can actually use it to write?
Well, it's a software that sets up the ebook. It allows you to put video in it, graphics. You can actually use it to write also. So
wow.
It's kind of a little bit of everything. But I was just kind of curious.
I will research that for you, and I will have you the answers on the next show.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on here. We're going to now talk about. We have one more caller. Okay, go ahead, please.
Hello?
Hello, who's on the line?
Yes. Am I on the line?
Yes, you are.
Yes. I'm a veteran, and I was listening to what was going on there and what have you. And I'm one of those that just received the Medal of Honor.
Well,
and I'm concerned about, I want to do some writing now, and especially concerning veteran on this PTSD in that area. And I have recently heard something about how effective therapy dogs were there. And I am one of those that really wants to write about and originate and form something like an urban league and a training center for veterans.
All right. Well, let's just ask Judy. Judy, when you wrote this book, about a therapy dog, were you talking about a trained therapy dog, or were you talking about how it was therapy for you in your life?
No, McDuff was a trained therapy dog.
Okay.
And he mentioned being a veteran. They are using therapy dogs now with the returning veterans, and it's just amazing the effect that they have. I actually saw on the national news about the veterans now that they're with the post-traumatic stress disorder that they're providing therapy dogs for them.
Well, here's an idea I have then. How about, and what is the caller's name? Your name, sir?
My name, Harvey Hambrick.
All right, Harvey, how about you do this? How about you email me at www.aspectsofwriting.
Okay.
Aspectsofwriting, yahoo.com. Sorry.
I certainly would do
Aspectsofwriting at yahoo.com is what you need to email me to. And I will hook you up with Judy here, so Judy can give you some advice on this.
I'll be glad to help.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay,
All
very
right.
good.
I understand that. I'm sorry, are you finished?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I'll wait until he hooked me up with Judy or someone
Absolutely. Make sure and
enjoyed
email me
both
at
of them.
aspectsofwriting at yahoo.com, and I will get that information to you for Judy.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Jim, I was just going to say, I hope you don't mind me calling you Jim.
Oh, that's fine.
I mean, better than sweetheart or baby, because in the television world, you get used to saying, good morning, sweetheart. Come on, let's get on. And you don't use names. You kind of use. Of course, nowadays you can get arrested.
You can't do that.
you
It's
get
harassment.
Not in the
It's
workplace.
harassment now. Be careful,
yeah.
Don.
Well, no, I don't. I'm not doing that
I
anymore.
don't want to
but-
bail you out or anything.
if anybody was going to bail me out, I'd come to you, Judy. But anyway, you have things with the dogs, and I understand that both of you are dog people.
You
Oh,
are.
absolutely. Yeah.
And my former, she talked me into getting this poodle,
Jack.
Jack.
Judy
Jack.
knows everything about you, Don. Isn't
Oh,
that a little
gosh.
scary?
It is worrisome. Jack is, God bless him, he's my pal, my friend, but I also call him a bed pirate because he steals everything in the bed. I mean, I have no room at all.
Yeah, I have a dog just like that.
Yeah, and God bless him and God bless you guys. And I love to read your book because I think that picture alone on the cover is extraordinary.
Well, I'll tell you
It's
something.
like looking at a human being's eyes.
It's integral to the book about the eyes.
Okay.
And the other thing is that it looks like a book that the lady wrote about her little cutesy dog that can set up. The genre that the book is you see it most, especially internationally, is mind, body, spirit, inspirational, and self-help. and then you see pets and everything, but it is not what you would expect. And I expect to hear from you after you read it.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, you can give me your, write down the...
I gave you my card in the book.
Okay, then I got it. Okay.
We're going to go back to the questions here at hand, which is what do I need for a barcode? It's very important that people understand also when you self-publish, you need what's called the EAN symbol. It's the standard barcode format in the publishing industry, and incorporates the ISBN number, and it also includes the price. And while most retail products in the United States are marked with a UPC code, we're all used to the UPC code on groceries. Or,
yes.
Every country uses the European article number, which is the EAN, and to provide worldwide standardization in the sale and handling of books, and because the book industry produces so many products annually. So that's important to keep in mind when you're getting ready to publish. But the most important thing, and I cannot stress this enough, to anyone, I don't care what you're writing, whether it's an article for a magazine or whatever, you need to copyright your work. So you need to get familiar with the Library of Congress. It's very easy. Just go online. Go to www.copyright.gov if you want to copyright.
See how that was done? It was just a really nice short...
Well, I don't know what your problem is, Judy, because... I think I kind of adore my my website handle.
I adore the way you two bicker about this. So.
I have no idea. You were such a feisty woman.
But you know something, James Kelly, because my son's name is James Kelly. You call him Jim, I'll call him James Kelly.
Coincidence.
A lot of people tell you that you don't have to copyright. And you really don't have to copyright. I mean, when you write it, it's yours. However, if you don't copyright it, and say down the road after you wrote it, say somebody wrote a book, Life with McDuffie, Life Lessons from a Service Dog, about a collie, that there was a trial in it. It was a lot of stuff. Well, then I could go to that and say, wait a minute, this plagiarism here, because here's my book and it has this in it.
Well, they used to have what was called the simple man's way to copyright.
Yes, the poor man.
Basically, you would send out your work to two or three friends and keep one in a safety deposit box somewhere.
Yes.
But do you really want to go through all that litigation to prove that you wrote something? I mean, when you can just file it, it's only like $28 to file your work with the U.S. Copyright Office.
You have to just send two published copies in. And I did it. I copyrighted mine.
And you can do everything online now.
You sure
can. Actually go online.
You sure can.
So
all of it online.
Yeah. And did you know that the Library of Congress has the largest collections of books in the world?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay. How about you, Don?
You're so smart.
It's called the internet.
That's right.
I write.
I'm not really smart, Don.
No, I write. I just write. Period. That's
what
I do.
Well,
I sit there and write. And to know all this stuff that you guys know.
Well, that's why he has 4 books and I only have 1. So.
I'm not saying the 4 books
writing.
are any good, Judy.
Well, I'm sure they are.
I'm not sure. I'm not gonna. They haven't sold, so maybe I'm still the hobbyist. I don't know.
You're creative; they'll sell.
Now, one of the other places you can go to for all this information as well, and it's Judy said it earlier, is www.bowker.com, and they pretty much control the industry when it comes to getting anything done.
Sure.
Even if you want to get your books in, what is that called? It's called Books
in Print.
Yes.
Yes.
And by the way, there is a fee for everything we're talking about when
Sure.
it comes to the ABI number or the BIP number. But you'll learn that when you go online and see. You do when you get ready to set up your little publishing company. Be prepared to spend $400 or $500 probably.
Easy.
Well, you were right. I am a faker and a poser.
Okay.
You nailed me right on. I walked in the door, and you
Don,
said this guy is a phony. Well, I can write the book. I just don't know all the other marketing skills that you guys have, and I respect that. I don't like it, but I respect it.
Okay, all right.
And
well,
so my son helped me out a lot. Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
I would love to have had someone to help me. Really.
Me as well. Yeah. I learned the lesson the hard way. I shared this on one show. I think I spent $30,000 publishing my first book, and today I could probably spend $2,000 and do the same thing.
Well, I spent. You want to know? You really?
I hate to even ask you. How much did you spend on?
You really want to know?
How much?
I mean, buying the book from Create Space, that was part of the expense. A couple $100.
Oh,
that's great.
I have a friend who just published through Create Space, and he's really high on it.
Well,
really? Good.
Once I
Have
got
you heard of it?
information. No, I have not.
It's Create Space.
Create Space is terrific.
Is it through Amazon? Is it through Amazon?
Yes, it is now.
Yeah.
When my son got me hooked up with it, all I did, he did all the the stuff, the necessary IBM numbers and so forth, and what I did was just went on the internet and ordered my books, and they showed up. And
Well, you know what's interesting about Amazon? They really are jumping into this self-publishing business.
They are.
Fast and furious.
They are.
Kindle
And they're
is
making
good.
money off of it,
I
too.
have a friend. Her name is Morgan St. James. She's going to be on the show on April 9th.
I know Morgan.
You know Morgan.
Yeah.
Well, she's written a new book called Confessions of a Cougar. And she's listed this book as a project on Kickstarter.com. And I encourage everyone to go to Kickstarter.com and look at Confessions of a Cougar. And I'm telling you this because if you want to self-publish, now she's an accomplished author
She
already.
sure is.
She doesn't need to do this. This is more of an experiment for her to see if she can really do this. And you can actually go there and pre-buy her books. But they don't call it pre-buying. They say if you donate $10, you can get a copy of the book. But the point is that this is a way for people to raise the money they need, all the money you need to do everything you need to do to get your book out there. So I encourage you to go to Kickstarter.com and type in Confessions of a Cougar by Morgan St. James, and you'll get an idea of what we're talking about here. But Amazon's really jumping into the market.
well, I was very fortunate, and I must say this: my son is terrific in the sense of marketing. I mean, he should be a marketer instead of doing a stand-up comedy, which is very funny doing that. But he could market pretty much anything, and the point being is that I listened. I dropped my ego down a couple of pegs, realizing I didn't know what he knows, and was amenable to whatever he was pitching. And he got me started, and the second book, I said, Don, I got the second book. Here it is. I sent it to him. And pretty soon it's back to me, and that's the second book.
He did it the easy way.
Yeah, well, I did. I had some help, and I had good help. I mean, that was the key. I didn't get out there with people that I didn't know. Right. Editors that would take my book, my manuscript, and screw it up, and say, well, you shouldn't say it this way. You should say it that way. No. You're not going to tell me how to say it. I know the character. I've lived with him for 15 rewrites. So why would I want to have you change it? So I don't even want to get into that contest. So he took it over. He did his thing. I got my books back. I got a box of books. I've sold. How many did you sell? How many did you sell overall?
My first printing was 1,500, and the distributor now they have, I think it's 150 left. But I didn't sell all of those. Some of them were gifts.
Right.
Which
no,
thank
but
you, by
how
the
many?
way.
How many can you say you got money from? Do you think?
Well, probably. I have an accountant that goes through all this. Probably about, of the 1,500, probably about 1,000.
I sold 15.
Well, you're just
But
starting,
I have a. This is through a distributor too,
But
Don.
you know what's
So
interesting
you
is
have help.
Yeah, I have help. I have help.
one of the facts out there is, and this is a fact, of all the published books out there, you can expect to sell less than 1,000 copies of any book out there. So when you see someone who sold, like we were talking about, Sidney Sheldon had 18 novels and sold 600 million copies, that's an exception to the rule.
Oh yeah.
And I think anyone who has dreams, that they're going to be this accomplished author and sell millions of books,
Right.
I hope the best for you. But don't expect that to happen. You have to be writing because it's a passion of yours.
Right.
I encourage you to go out there and publish. I encourage you to go out there and try and sell your work. But don't be disappointed if you're not selling, 10,000 copies or 100,000 copies, because that might not happen.
I understand that, and I have no problem with your analysis of that. People that are just starting out writing, they say, well, I want to write. Okay, what do you want to write about? Well, I have this idea about this and that, whatever, and but I don't know how to get started, and there's plenty of people that are listening that are would-be writers that may have brilliant ideas, just can't get started. Right. And so when that happens, and you get started and you start with that first sentence and then the second sentence. So what I'm saying to the listener is I'm trying to be encouraging. Yeah. Because there's so many pitfalls, and I know that I'm only going to sell a few books. I know that. But if I sell my screenplay and it turns
Actually, your screenplay might sell your book.
Well, there
Right.
you go. See, there you go. That's that's coming in the back door.
Right.
And I have no problem with coming in the front door, back door,
Doesn't
or the
matter.
window.
You just want in the door.
I just want to get my stuff out there before it's over.
Yeah.
But people who are listening, I would encourage them to take a stab at sitting down either at the computer or a pencil or whatever, crayon even, and write the first sentence.
Right. That was the number one thing I always told people when I had my lecture group is just write something. I don't care what it is. I don't care where it is in the story. It can be in the middle. It can be in the end. It can be the beginning. I don't care. Write the first sentence. If you write that first sentence, you'll find when you go back, now you have something to write about. You can see it on paper.
And we all know that writing is rewriting.
Yes.
And you can
my
rewrite
goodness.
and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and it's all okay.
Well, and one of the things we always talk about too, or we have in the past shows, is that when you're writing, you may be going along and you may find you're going to have a character you need to throw in there. Then you have to stop and think. Judy, you mentioned this earlier, how, okay, now I put that in there. Do I have to go back and add it to the beginning? So you are constantly rewriting that book.
And you're thinking about it even in your sleep.
In your sleep.
You're going to
At 4:20 every morning, it got
Driving to
me
work.
up. But
Well,
you know,
should've called me.
you're right. I didn't know you then, Don. But you're right about, Don is right about encouraging the listeners to just start. I remember I wrote a chapter, my first chapter, and I told a friend, I'm writing this book. Would you come over? I'll fix dinner, and would you read the chapter? So fix dinner, and I'm in the kitchen cleaning up. He's in the lazy boy reading the chapter, and I'm peeping every so often to see, what's going on, if he has any reaction. So finally, I saw where he'd finished, and I went in and I stood there and looked at him and said, well, what do you think? And I'll never forget, and I don't let him forget this. He looked at me and he says, it sounds like an essay. And it was like crushed, and then I knew you've got work to do. You have work to do.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fun process, and I encourage, like I said a minute ago, I encourage people that are out there actually trying to write to experience the joy and the frustration and the fun of sitting down and actually putting something on paper, and you don't have to show it to anybody.
No. That's the thing. You can write for yourself. You don't have to show it to anyone. I mean, a lot of people write poetry, but they wouldn't want to share with no one. I write all the time. There's a lot of work I've done I haven't shared with a single soul. I probably have 26 books written. I just haven't published any of them. 2 out of the 26. I have several scripts written as well. And I think I've only shopped around 1. So, to me, it's about the joy of writing as much as anything. If you get lucky enough to sell that 1 script, it could propel you into, writer stardom. So
somebody once said, if you follow the money, you're going to lose.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if you follow your heart, you have a chance of winning.
Right.
It doesn't say you're going to win, but you have a chance of winning.
Yeah.
Well, Life with Macduff is a book that I know from the feedback that has affected and inspired a lot of people. And one of the things that I use the book for is to talk to audiences about the animal assistant therapy and animal assistant reading programs like Therapy Dog International and Reading with Rover. Because Reading with Rover, where a school boy or girl reads to your dog once a week, can actually change their life.
So your book is really not so much about following the money, as Don said. It's really something that you felt you needed to get out
and
there
I
to
can
inspire.
use the book to speak to audiences and tell them about that, and ask them, tell them to volunteer, to help people.
Well, let me ask you a question. You
Yes,
said
sir.
you could read the book to the animal, and the animal would get something out of it. Could you come over and deal with my dog Jack?
Are you having
No,
problems,
it
Don?
goes. It's the other way, Dawn.
Oh.
You read to the dog.
I see.
Yes.
Oh, so if I read to Jack,
Yes.
then he would move over.
Yes.
I see.
You try that.
Well, we're going to be winding down the show here. The whole purpose of the show tonight was to enlighten you a little bit, like we talked about earlier, as far as what procedures you need to go through when you go out there to publish. And I'm going to mention again www.bowker.com. Also, I'm going to mention that on next week's show, the topic is actually going to be publishers versus self-publishing.
We should come back.
Ooh, would you like me to stop by and say a few
We
words?
should come back.
The venom is not quite out yet, Jim.
I could tell. Should you find a publisher or self-publisher? Can anyone publish? We will debate vanity and subsidiary publishers, as well as the print-on-demand and ebooks. And the ebooks is an important topic. I don't know, Don, how much you've gone into that yet. But
They're into it with Kindle. They got the
all right.
They
Yes.
have increased 169% in 1 year.
Okay.
The
Oh, yeah,
number.
absolutely.
They got
yeah.
a pool too that if your book is rented by people, that if they're rented so many times, you get X amount of dollars. Well, I mean, there's thousands of books being rented and borrowed. Well, it's not going to happen to me. But the point being is that there's a chance for authors to make a few dollars that way.
Now, also, I'm going to mention before we go off the air that next week we're going to have Morgan St. James, as I said earlier on the show, Oksana Marafati, and excuse me, Oksana, if I didn't pronounce that correctly, and the Australian author Anthony Karaki, and he'll actually be calling in from Australia. He's dying to be on the show because he wants to try and get a U.S. audience, so we're going to try and get him on. I'd like to thank my guests, Judy McFadden and Don Lewis Barnhart. You can find their links. Both their links are on my website, Aspects of Writing. And I'd also like to say that Aspects of Writing is broadcast every other Monday here on KLAV. And we also rebroadcast every Wednesday, 8 o'clock, on VegasAllNetRadio.com. That's every Wednesday, 8 o'clock, on VegasAllNetRadio.com. Future air dates and lineups can also be found at www.aspectsofwriting.com. Please sign our guest book while visiting Aspects of Writing, and you can post questions or comments there on the guest book. That's aspectsofwriting@yahoo.com is our email address. And remember, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing right here on KLAV.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV every other Monday at 9 p.m. Your host, James Kelly, will bring you an informative look at every aspect of the writing industry. Guests on the show will share their experience and what inspired them to write. Together, we will explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and sell your work. So join us every other Monday for Aspects of Writing right here on KLAV.
The topic of this next show was publishers versus self-publishing. Should you find a publisher or self-publish? Can just anyone publish? On this show we debated vanity and subsidiary publishing, as well as print-on-demand and ebooks. My guests were authors Morgan St. James, Oksana Marafati, and Australian author Anthony Karaki. And as you will discover with this episode, I am not the greatest at pronunciation, especially when it comes to one's name. This was another fun night in the studio. Enjoy.
Views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the hosts and guests and not necessarily those of the staff or management of KLAV.
Welcome to Aspects of Writing with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. The phone lines are open at 731-1230. That's 731-1230. Or toll free, 1-866-820-KLAV. Now, let's get writing. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. This is your host, James Kelly. On the show this evening we have Morgan St. James, who's the author of The Mafia Funeral, The Silver Sisters Mysteries, and Writer's Tricks of the Trade. We also have Oksana Marafati. Is that correct, Oksana?
Marafiotti.
Marafiotti. She's the author of American Gypsy, a memoir of a Romanian gypsy childhood.
Romani gypsy childhood. That's all right, James.
What a way to start the show. And then we also have on the show via telephone Australian author Anthony Karaki. He'll be joining us here in a few minutes. The topic of tonight's show is publishers versus self-publishing. Should you find a publisher or self-publish? Can anyone publish? We will debate the vanity and subsidiary publishers, as well as print-on-demand and ebooks. I always like to start with fun facts or fun quotes, so we're going to start off with a quote by Brian Stableford. Morgan, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I'll take that one, James. Brian Stableford wrote, "People are always impressed by the creative power of a writer, but an author's image can easily be demolished or made humble with a few well-chosen questions. For instance, Bob Shaw observed that the deadliest questions usually come as a pair. Have you published anything? Loosely translated as, I've never heard of you. And what name do you write under? Loosely translatable as, I've definitely never heard of you.
And that is so true. You had a story you told me earlier about what happened with you.
When I was a young pup in a different life, I was working for a theatrical business manager, and there was a cafeteria next door where all of the Hollywood greats would come on South Beverly Drive in Beverly Hills. And the owner always used to like to introduce me to different stars that were in there. And one day she introduced me to somebody named Keith, and she said, he doesn't have anybody to have breakfast with. Keith, why don't you have breakfast with this young lady? And so we started talking, and she had said, Keith is an actor. And I said, well, I understand that you're in the business, that you're an actor. Are you doing anything right now? And he said, well, yeah. He said, I just starred in a little thing called The Eddie Cantor Story. And it was an actor named Keith Brazell who was quite popular at the time. And I had egg on my face.
So loosely translated, I've never heard of you.
Problem was I had heard of him. I just didn't recognize him.
And we have a quote number 2. Oksana, would you like to take that one?
Sure. In 1990, after selling his bookstore chain to Barnes & Noble for $45 million, Gary Hoover founded Reference Press, renamed later as Hoover's Incorporated, as a reference book publisher, beginning with a book called Hoover's. In 1995, the company went online with the launch of Hoover's Online. In December 2002, he sold Hoover's Inc. to Dun & Bradstreet for $117 million.
What's interesting about that to me is the fact that he was in the bookstore business, saw the chance to basically let the big chain take over because they would have put him out of business anyway, and then had the sense to know that when he went online, I can score with this as well. So he made it in both online bookstore as well as a chain
Very
bookstore.
smart.
Absolutely. And Anthony, are you there?
I'm here. How you going?
Oh, great. So how would you like to read number 3, Anthony? And Anthony is actually calling in from Melbourne, Australia.
Very far away.
Just a few miles, huh?
And it's tomorrow.
And it's tomorrow.
Yeah, it is. I'm in the future.
He's a future
okay,
guest.
Yeah, I'll read number 3 for you.
All right.
Okay. English writer G.K. Chesterton once said, I owe my success to having listened respectfully to the very best advice and then going away and doing the exact opposite.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering how he knew how to read that, it's because he's in the future.
I am.
All right. Number 4 is Ralph Waldo Emerson is quoted as having said, talent alone cannot make a writer. There must be a man behind the book. And I have to say that I'm actually a distant relative of Ralph Waldo Emerson on my grandmother's side. He's like a great-great-great-great-grandfather. If you're just now tuning in, you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, right here on KLAV, Las Vegas. Before we get into the topic of tonight's show's publishers versus self-publishing, I'd like to introduce my guests and let them tell you a little bit about themselves. And when they finish, I have a few questions for them. Morgan, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, sure. I always say that I'm an accidental writer because I didn't start out to be one. I was an interior designer and was asked to write an article for a very prestigious design magazine. And my partner and I said, yeah, sure, we'll do that. The deadline was approaching, and there was one thing we'd forgotten. We weren't writers. And so the night before, we were agonizing, drinking some wine and so forth. And instead of writing a technical article about creating a unique floor, we wrote a noir mystery with us combing the waterfront for crates. Publisher loved it, and I was a writer. I was hooked. I wrote magazine articles for several years, and then I started writing novels. Started out with the Silver Sisters mystery, A Corpse in the Soup, which was the first one in the series.
And that's with your sister, is that correct?
And that's with my sister. She was living in Juneau, Alaska at the time. She now lives in Manville, Oregon. So we write long distance. There are 3 books in the series now. Corpse in the Soup, 7 Deadly Samovars, and Vanishing Act in Vegas. And we are currently working on Diamonds in the Dumpster. I also write on my own. I have a new book coming out in July from Oak Tree Press called Who's Got the Money, which is a government embezzlement fiasco. And I have The Mafia Funeral and Other Short Stories, which was released recently. My book on writing is Writer's Tricks of the Trade. And I'm probably going to take up too much time if I tell you much more about myself, so I should probably turn this over. People get tired listening to it.
Well, we'll have some of your credentials on my website as well, so we'll tell them about that before we leave tonight. Oksana, would you like to tell a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am Oksana Marafioti, and I'm the author of a memoir called American Gypsy. And it is about my experience growing up in a gypsy family.
Okay.
Romani is the proper term.
That was very
I know that
slick.
now.
Very slick.
Well, I'm quite used to this, so you know. And it's about my experience growing up in the former Soviet Union, in a family of very well-known musicians and artists, and about moving to United States, actually to Hollywood. And the book is just about that experience.
Well, I noticed that your book was also published by Macmillan's.
It's actually published by Macmillan's imprint, Farrar, Straus and Giroux, FSG.
Okay. And Anthony, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
How about if you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I wrote a book called Vagabond, which it's like a philosophical travel adventure, basically centering on the pursuit of happiness. Behind that, the main inspiration for it was basically I've been traveling probably since I turned 17, 18 non-stop, and all the wonderful things I had a chance to see and experience. I just really want to tie it into one book and try and share those experiences. I was actually born and raised and still living in Melbourne, Australia, and I grew up playing the drums since the age of 7. My family's very musical, so I've definitely inherited that trait and that passion for music. And yeah, I started writing when I was 18, some songs, just some random articles for different publications, and it eventuated into the book Vagabond.
And we're going to go into it a little bit later, but I know that your characters in the book, people were writing you about the jewelry that they were wearing or the artifacts that you described, and you're actually going to be producing a line of jewelry based on that novel as well, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. It's going to be fully customizable, so they can choose to have it in its original state. For example, there's a wooden cross that appears quite prominently in the book, but they can also choose to have it in gold or silver or whatever they like, so it can be personalized for them.
Well, I'm going to start a roundtable discussion here, and basically I usually ask specific questions, and because I want to inspire our audience out there that are or want to be writers, or even for those that have written and want to get published. So my first question, I'm going to start off with Oksana. Oksana, what inspired you to write your first novel?
My first novel was inspired by my experiences growing up in my family. I come from a background of people who were very interested in mysticism and spirituality. My grandparents very, very much into the occult, I guess, but not in the dark sense of it,
Not the evil side of the occult.
Old folk art type of spirituality,
mystic, right.
Old country type. And so my original idea for a novel was to base characters on these people from my family and kind of create these experiences and adventures. But I actually ended up writing a memoir, and that came about because an agent that I met that I was pitching the novel, said, well, why don't you just write the real thing? My father was an exorcist for many years, and she said, well, that's more interesting. Just do that. It's right there. You don't have to make up characters.
So your agent guided you.
She kind of did.
Yeah.
And it was kind of daunting for me because most people don't want to write memoirs.
Right.
It's just it's a very scary feeling.
Well, you have to
when
put yourself
begin.
into it, and you really disclose a lot about who you are and the family. Yeah,
especially the others.
The others, right. They're the ones who don't like it. All right.
Yeah.
And you gave us a little bit of an idea what inspired you. Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, that was what inspired me to get into magazine writing. Getting into novel writing was a whole different story. My sister and I both had publication credits, but not in fiction. And we really didn't know each other very well. She moved to Alaska when she was 20, and I'm 5.5 years older. So right about the time we would have been friends, she was thousands of miles away, and my mom was the conduit who told each of us what was happening. Mom got sick. Phyllis came to L.A. to help me get her settled. And as we talked and got to know each other, we realized that we liked a lot of the same things. And the binding thing was that we both loved funny mysteries. And there we were, both published writers. So about a week later, I sent her a message. No, there was no email then. I called her, and I said, what would you think about creating our own mystery series? I kind of had this idea about an over-the-hill hippie who lives in Juneau, Alaska, and runs an antique shop, and her twin sister, who is a Beverly Hills widow, who writes an advice column, and she's very selfish and manipulative. She said, that sounds like you, Morgan. And I said, well, you're the hippie.
And she lives in Juneau.
And, right. And so we created the identical twins, the Silver Sisters. And we loosely modeled them on ourselves. Actually, Goldie is pure Phyllis, but I always have to qualify it and say that Godiva is much more selfish than I am. I didn't live in Beverly Hills, but at one time I did live 2 houses outside of Beverly Hills. If you crossed the street, it was Beverly Hills. And I'm not an advice columnist, but people are always asking me for advice. So the Silver Sisters were born, and now we are working on the 4th book in the series. Incidentally, A Corpse in the Soup, the first book, was named the best mystery audiobook of 2007 by USA Book News. So we kind of did what we set out to do.
Well, that's perfect. Anthony, what inspired you to write your novel?
My main inspiration definitely came from my love for travel. Being in Australia, it's so far away from everywhere else, so when people do try and work up the capital to go travelling, they usually go for quite a long time. So when I first turned 18, I went for 5 weeks across England, Spain, and Greece, and it set off the travel bug like something bad. You wouldn't believe it. Ever since then, I've just been traveling a lot to Europe, all around, and it was just, I guess, being inspired by the people I'd come across, meeting people from all walks of life, different ages, all there for their own reason, expats, doing a lot of reading while I was traveling, and I just guess I felt like I wanted to give something back to all the books that inspired me to love reading since I was little, and I just wanted to try and convey the experiences that I had, the great moments that I shared with different people through the book Vagabond. So those that are thinking about traveling or want to get away for whatever reason, I was just hoping to give them something, to give them a bit more of a push to go and do that.
Well, just to clarify, Vagabond, it is not is it a true novel or is it a fiction?
It's fiction.
But it's based on your travels, though, right?
Based on my travels. It's got elements of magical realism, definitely, going for that Latin American style, but it is a fiction book.
And why did you decide to self-publish?
I decided to self-publish because I was just looking at how the industry was going. I mean, you've always got the paperbacks, of course, but then the whole new ebook technology started to really take off. And I was just having a look at all different avenues using social media, and I thought, I'll try and give this a shot myself. And, you know, at the time when I was sending off a few query letters to agents, I wasn't having any luck, really. You know, everyone comes across rejections, or, you know, sometimes some people don't even bother to write back, which is a little bit disheartening. But I thought, well, if I'm going to have such a hard time going that route, I'll just do it myself and see how it goes. And, you know, lucky for me, it went on to become a bestseller. So that's, it's the route I decided to go. Funnily enough, though, learning how to do the formatting of the book, that probably took double the amount of time of me actually writing it. It was quite a process to learn as
I think
HTML programming. And
that's, I think, the misnomer people have. They think that, you know, writing the book is easy. I mean, it's hard, but actually writing the book is the easy part. It's the formatting of it, getting it ready for production, and getting it produced. That's the work part of it.
And promoting it.
And promoting it.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely felt, looking back on it, that writing the book and editing and proofreading, I felt that was maybe 30% of the effort. Originally I came into it a little bit naive, thinking that would be 90% of the work done, but it was kind of like a drop in the pond compared to everything else you have to do.
Well, I know Morgan is also self-published, but you've had a traditional publishers, plus you've also self-published.
Yeah, well, I actually determine which is the best for the particular book. Most of my books are published by traditional publishers. And when I did Writer's Tricks of the Trade, it was a book that I needed right away because I give a lot of talks, and people would always ask, well, where can I get your writing book? And I didn't have one. I've written 500 published articles on writing, and I would direct them to examiner.com, but I didn't have a book. And I realized that I had enough material for 3 books. Mm-hmm. So what I did is I decided that because I needed to get it right away, and it was going to be what they call a back-of-the-house book mostly, which is when you give a talk and people want to buy your book afterwards for instruction. So, not necessarily for instruction, but a lot of the back-of-the-house books are that. And so I decided my best way to do it would be to self-publish it, but I set up my own publication company to do that, and it's professionally edited, professional cover, professionally formatted. I mean, it's I strove to have the exact same type of product I would get from a traditional publisher, mm-hmm. and it's distributed throughout the world by the same distributors that
right.
traditional publishers use.
Now, Oksana, I know yours is through a major publishing house.
Yes.
Did you ever toy with the idea of self-publishing, or because you spoke with an agent, so yours was...
Yes, I didn't really think about publishing when I went in to that first writers conference. It was the Las Vegas Writers Conference, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think about 4 or 5 years ago. I just went in out of curiosity, just to see how the industry works. I don't think you can pick one or the other without knowing enough about the industry as a whole. And that's what I wanted to do, is just to go and talk to agents, to go to talk to authors and other people to see what stages people are in their projects.
And as for myself, I actually self-published my first book because I never had the intentions of ever having a bestseller or anything like that with the book. My intention was to sell the script because I actually wrote the script first. I thought, well, if I create the book and I publish it, I was toying with the idea of getting an agent, and then I actually saw Dan Pointer's book on how to self-publish in a Kinko's in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I was living at the time. And then I thought, well, I can do this. And so I actually quit my job and spent a year working on that project. So I'm kind of like Anthony in a way. I just thought, well, I don't really want to toy around with this. I'll just do it myself.
Yeah, well, Dan Pointer's somebody who can inspire you to self-publish.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and that was one of his first books out there, by the way, at the time, because that was 1990, I think.
He's got a gazillion of them.
Oh, I know. Yeah. He's like the godfather of self-publishing.
Right, the guru of self-publishing.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask Oksana, what advice would you give an up-and-coming writer, author trying to break into the business? And I know you're new, and I know you're new at this, and I know yours was a different route at which you went in.
It was very untraditional, it seems like, from all the other experiences that I hear about. The only advice I can give is that to try it. A lot of people don't even try it.
But at least you did something. You actually went to a conference.
Yes.
So you at least made that effort.
I was very open to all the possibilities. I would never think about writing a memoir on my own, I think, because it was...
Okay. And what about you, Morgan?
Well, I would say that you have to learn your craft. Go to workshops, go to conferences, take the things that work for you, and be sure that whatever you do, it's the very best you can possibly do. And the other thing is, don't lose faith. Just keep at it. And you'll be amazed if you look at things you wrote, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago after you've been writing, you'll look at them and say, oh, my God, I've grown.
Right. I know that's the way I am as well.
And actually, can I add something real quick?
Sure, absolutely.
And I think Anthony will agree with me if he has a musical background. I'm a classically trained pianist myself, and that's a good thing, right? I hope.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you're looking at it from a point of view of a musician, you cannot become good at something without hours and hours of practice. And I think a lot of people who go into writing, they assume because we write since we're 4 or 5 that we should know how to do it. And it takes a very long time to get to the point. You have to keep writing to find out what kind of a writer you are.
I agree and I disagree, and I'm going to tell you why. There's a friend of mine in Atlanta, Georgia, who published two books. One was Sooty and the other one was Alice. Both were made into Lifetime movies. And her writing was absolutely horrible. But she was fortunate enough to have a friend who also was a romance author, and she read it, and it was very difficult for her to get through, but she said, these are great stories. So they found an editor, and they polished it and sent it in. They were both published, and they were both made into movies. So I think the desire, as long as the desire is there are ways to get your work out there. I mean, I'm not suggesting for everyone to do that. I really do think you're right. I know I hone my skills every day as well. You know, every time I write something, I get better and better and better. But I don't want to discourage anyone from the idea of that you don't have a chance if you're just starting this, because that isn't necessarily true.
Well, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's just you need to practice it all the time instead of saying, I'm going to wait and see if somebody will take my story and then I'll start writing. You know, the work has to come before, I think.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. You definitely have to get it written first.
I agree with that too. I mean, I have 6 novels in publication now, and I can look back at some of the early things and think, I would have done that a little differently, you know, if I knew then what I know now. Not to say it's a bad book, because it was named Best Mystery Audio Book, but there were certain things I would have changed. I'd like to add one more thing, too, if we have a minute, is that don't be defensive. You know, if you belong to a critique group, understand that for the most part, those people are trying to help you. Not to put you down. Just a quick example, we had a fellow in a critique group that I belonged to in Los Angeles, and he had a very long introduction. He was an unpublished author. He had a very long introduction, like 25-page introduction. And I said, you know, you've actually got to break that a little bit. And he said, well, I don't care if anybody likes it. I like it. And that's not going to get him published.
No. But because writers have egos, let's just be honest here. We hate hearing anything negative. I mean, it's good for us. I mean, I actually like it when someone tells me something, because I actually listen to them,
too.
And I usually make changes, unless I've just determined they're wrong. But anyway, we do have a caller online. Judy McFadden is online.
Oh.
Judy, are you there?
Yes, James. How are you?
Great. How are you?
And Morgan and Oksana.
Hey, Judy.
Guys. I mean, we have met not too long ago. And
like 2 days ago.
Like 2 days ago. And you guys were giving great advice. I mean, I know the listeners out there are just really getting a good chunk of advice. However, my question is for Anthony.
Okay.
Yes?
I wrote a book, Anthony, about a Scottish Terrier therapy dog. And soon after it was published, Australia just ate it up. It's in, I can't tell you how many online bookstores in Australia. Borders in Australia, after it was out, it was #1 of the top 5 pet and domestic animal books. It's in the libraries at Brisbane, Newcastle, Melbourne, State Library of Western Australia, and it's on the internet, the website for the National Library of Australia. I didn't realize it. Is there an attraction for dogs in Australia?
I think all of Australia is such an abundance of wildlife. I think they love everything, really. Like everyone down here is really an animal lover. I guess nature in the Australian environment is such a big part of growing up. I mean, going overseas, you know, it didn't really cross my mind, but people started to say, oh, you know, there's so many dangerous animals in Australia, and you tell them a story about a wombat or a shark or something. I think coming from Australia doesn't register that that's a sort of, you know, a unique thing to a lot of people. But down under, everyone's really an animal lover. Dogs, cats, the works. So, yeah, I mean, congratulations on your success. That's amazing.
Okay, well, I didn't realize that at the time, and they're just, I mean, that's just surprised me, and especially the libraries, too, you know. So, okay, well, then I thought it was just the dingoes running around there.
Quite a few interesting animals down under, if you ever have the chance to come down.
Oh, yes.
I did.
Yeah, Morgan.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, yeah, Morgan, your son lives in Blue Mountain Ranges?
Around Katoomba up in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, it's a very nice area.
Yeah, okay. I was there in September.
I'm going to get off. You guys have a lot more advice. And James,
yes.
take care.
All right, thank you, Judy.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, Anthony, what advice would you give to an up-and-coming writer or author?
similar to what Morgan was saying, just you've got to keep the faith and the passion in yourself. I think at the end of the day, you really can't rely on anyone but yourself to get the job done, do what it is that you need to do. Do the best you can to get it out there. Treat the internet as your best friend. Social media, it's really amazing the people that you can reach using social media. And just stick to your guns and accept constructive criticism. Know as well that a lot of things are subjective, and just keep trying, and eventually you could be fortunate enough to get some recognition. When I first published my book, I thought, well, I'm from Australia, so I guess it's just going to be Australians buying it. And I've noticed the last couple of weeks, the American audience on Facebook and my website has eclipsed that by quite a bit. And then I'm getting people from France and Saudi Arabia writing to me about the book. And the internet's just amazing that way. You just never know where the book's going to end up and how it can inspire people. And the fans you can find across the world is just amazing.
Yes. Where can people learn more about your book?
They can go to my website, which is anthonykarakai.com. I've got a strange, unique surname, so to spell that it's Karakai. So you go to anthonykarakai.com. They can go to facebook.com/KarakaiBooks. And I welcome everyone to join me on Facebook, get into a discussion, just drop by, say hi, anything. I just love talking to everyone.
And Oksana, when will your book be out?
It comes out July 3rd of this year.
Okay. And you'll have to give us more information when it comes out, or do you know already where they can?
It's on Amazon.
It's
on Amazon?
Everywhere. It's available to pre-order right now, but it's going to be in all the major bookstores. And
great.
I have an author's page on Facebook.
Oh, great. Okay.
Meanwhile, just posting some of the events that I'm involved in right now.
All right. And Morgan?
Well, you can find me at my website, www.morganstjames, that's STJAMES-author.com. My books are in just about every online bookstore you can imagine. You can order them from your local bookstores. And I'm on Facebook. If you put my name into Google, you'll get a lot of pages.
Okay. Just for anyone tuning in, I'd like to remind you you're listening to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV, and I'm your host, James Kelly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the topic of the show tonight, which is publishers versus self-publishing. We've hinted on that a little bit already. I'm going to read our first quote from the internet. Here's a few facts for that. After graduating from college in 1980, Michael Prescott had labored for almost 3 decades to become a best-selling novelist, writing more than 20 books under various names. He enjoyed critical praise and some successes. But when 25 publishers passed on buying his thriller Riptide, now keep in mind he'd already been a published author, Michael Prescott thought maybe his career as a writer was over. Then on a whim, he decided to self-publish Riptide as an ebook, selling more than 800,000 copies. Since then, 5 of Prescott's thrillers have been logged a total of 42 weeks on USA Today's bestseller list. Due to his newfound celebrity, his 1992 book Shiver was made into a 2011 movie. One reason Prescott is able to capitalize on the ebook revolution is that he already has a back list of novels previously edited and released by traditional publishers. Once his publisher let his past books go out of print, this is important, the rights reverted back to Prescott. So in other words, now he had the rights to take those books and do whatever he wanted, and he was smart. Prescott is quoted as having said, "It's a whole new world. You're eliminating the middleman." And he's talking about the internet book. Anthony, I know that you're doing very well with your ebooks as well. Is that correct?
Yes. Selling steadily in a whole host of countries, which is great. Selling books in places I just never imagined I would. For example, Tanzania, which was an interesting little standout. I wasn't even ever thinking that someone from Tanzania would be reading Vagabond. I've just been, just trying to market things myself. Being self-published, it can be difficult. You're just trying to wear so many hats. You're trying to be the writer, the proofreader, the editor, the marketer. It can be difficult, but fortunate for me, I was discovered by a really good New York City literary agent who I'm currently working with.
Yes,
so
and congratulations.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. It's definitely going to alleviate a lot of the pressure, and I guess, he's got the required expertise and knowledge, which I don't have, so it definitely helps me out a lot. And in the meantime, I'm just writing my second book, which is titled The End of Athens.
All right, great. Morgan, you want to read number 2?
Yeah, I will, and I hope I'm going to pronounce this name correctly. That is a problem here.
Yes, it is.
Barbara Freethy has been a top-selling romance author for the past 20 years, who has written 30 novels. She has sold 1.3 million self-published ebook versions of 17 of her out-of-print novels.
There again, the out-of-print.
Yes, because the rights reverted to
Back
her.
to her.
So they've already been edited by the publisher.
They've already been out
had
there on the
whole
market.
thing done. They're ready to go.
And now they have a new life as an ebook.
Yep. 9 of them hit USA Today's top 150. She's quoted as having said, "There have been more changes in the last 2 years than in the previous 18 years I have been in publishing." She is now considering self-publishing her new book, A Secret Wish. She finds it satisfying to see the shift of power within the publishing industry. Authors are gaining more control over their work than ever before. And, that is really a true comment.
Absolutely.
Publishing is nothing like it was a couple of years ago. Just in the few short years since, my first book was published, it's changed radically.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting? I originally started publishing in 1995. And in the span of all those years, it's amazing how the bookstores don't welcome self-published authors anymore. Actually, at that time, it was the heyday of self-publishing to get your book in a store. It was very easy. You would just go to the events coordinators, you would show them the book, they would critique it. If they liked it, you got a book signing. And then from there, it could just take off. Today, you can't. It's very difficult to just go into a store and say, I'm a local author, I have a book, I'd like to present it to you, can I do a book signing? Nope, you have to go through the main office in New York. And then there's so much, criteria you have to go through to get
Listen,
that.
when you live in a city like L.A. and people say, "What do you do?" and you say, "Oh, I'm an author," and they look at you and raise an eyebrow and say, "Oh, you too?"
Right. Everybody's an author. Anthony, would you like to take the next one?
Sure thing. Attorney and debut novelist Darcy Chan self-published her debut novel, The Mill River Recluse, after being rejected by more than 100 literary agents. Set in a small Vermont town, the moody mystery centers on what happened to a beautiful young bride. It spent 16 weeks on USA Today's bestseller list, peaking at number 6. Chan said she has sold 416,000 copies of the 99-cent ebook.
Right. So, it's amazing how it's like Barbara Freethy said. In the last 2 years, it's amazing how ebooks have just taken off. I mean, they're almost dominating the industry. Amazon is very smart. Amazon, actually, all of them are becoming very smart about picking up on that. But Amazon really helps you get your book out there on ebooks.
Well, they have that Amazon Select program now, which is a good marketing tool. I actually put The Mafia Funeral and other short stories into it, and saw a real surge in the sales after the days when the book was free.
Yeah. Oksana, would you like to take number 4?
Sure. Amanda Hawking, 27, a lifelong Minnesotan from a working-class background, has been telling stories almost since she could climb out of the crib, and she has been writing full-fledged novels since the age of 17. Unable to find an agent, she began self-publishing her young adult paranormal romances in 2010. They became huge hits. 7 of them have spent 50 weeks on USA Today's last year. She has sold over 1.5 million copies of her work on her own. There was not a single book agent or publishing house or sales force or marketing manager or bookshop anywhere in sight.
I think last show, Judy not only was on the last show, but also Don Lewis Barnhart was on the show. And even with Don's credentials, because he was a big-time Hollywood director, he still could not find someone to take his books. And here's an example of someone who said, you know what, I don't need this. I don't need the rejections. I'm going to do it myself. And he went out there and he self-published 4 books. So that just gives you an idea of... I think the bookstores are making a mistake today by not doing their events like they used to, by not having, the opportunity for at least try an author and see how well they're going to sell in the stores.
Right, exactly. Even when you go in and say you're a local author, and when you're published by a small press, which the traditional presses I'm with are small presses.
Correct, yeah.
They still kind of raise an eyebrow. My books have been approved for Barnes & Noble and stuff like that, but the majority of my sales come from the internet.
Anthony, in Australia, what is the mood like there as far as getting your books in the store?
Well, a lot of stores in Australia, a lot of bookstores like Borders, a lot of them have shut down, actually. I don't know if that's directly attributable to the ebook revolution, but a lot of them are, it's hard to kind of find those big major retailers these days. In terms of ebooks, from what I understand, it's not at the level of the USA or the UK or Europe with the Kindle and the iBook store. They're still catching on down here, but it's going pretty well. I mean, with the retailers shutting down, I guess that is indicative of the shift in power in a way. But I mean, yeah, every day ebooks are growing and growing. It's not quite that American level yet, though.
Right. Well, I'm going to go into a little bit here about what our topic is tonight, which is publishers versus self-publishing. I'm going to read a little bit of what I got off the internet. Today, authors such as Prescott and Hawking can bypass traditional publishers. They can digitally format their own manuscript, set a price, and sell it to readers through a variety of online retailers and devices. Amazon sells ebooks via Kindle device, and it is a Kindle app for smartphones and computers as well. Apple has done the same thing. Apple has now Apple iBook. Is that what it's called? Apple Author, which you can create your book and then upload it to iTunes, I believe. Almost every day brings more digital modes for readers to obtain books in non-print forms, creating more choices for readers, opportunities for self-published writers, and challenges for traditional publishers. There was a time when the big stores put the small mom-and-pop bookstores out of business. And interestingly enough, unless these bigger chains, which they are, they're revamping the way they sell as well, you're going to see the traditional bookstore go to the wayside. You may end up seeing more mom and pop bookstores pop up as they disappear, because even here, Anthony, in the United States, Borders has also closed doors.
Okay.
So I guess that's a worldwide.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. As you were saying with the mom and pop stores, down here there's definitely a unique sort of, I guess, a sort of nostalgic niche across Australia with those little independent retailers selling everything from second-hand books to hard-to-find books. I mean, a lot of the times when I'd go to Borders, I'd be looking for a particular book, and amazingly enough, they wouldn't actually stock it, but I could go to a small independent retailer, and they'd have those little books that, might not have had a lot of coverage or a lot of marketing put behind them, but those retailers definitely did well, and they still continue to do so.
What's interesting, there was actually a movie about how the small stores went out of business. I don't know if you saw that movie with Meg Ryan or not, which You've Got Mail.
Oh,
yeah.
And interestingly enough, that's really what was happening to the mom and pop stores when that movie came out.
Well, another spin on that of what's happening with traditional publishers is, as recently as a couple of years ago, a book that was digitally printed was disdained. It was looked upon as not being a real book. And then quietly, the larger publishers started doing their smaller titles in print on demand, but they did not publicize that. And they still continued to say, oh, well, PODs, those aren't real books. And now so many of the larger publishers' books that, as I say, are the smaller market, are being produced that same way. And, of course, ebooks, well, they weren't real books at all.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And so that changing profile for publishing is one of the things that's putting the bookstores into problems and the publishers.
Well, I think the iPad changed the whole history of ebooks, that and Kindle. I mean, without a doubt, they created the market was there after that. No one wanted to carry around on a hardback when you could have a whole volume of books to carry with you on the plane.
Absolutely. Well, I carry them around on my phone now.
No, absolutely, yeah. In the past, if a manuscript was rejected, it usually sat unread in a writer's desk drawer because of the alternative, self-publishing one's book. and that carried a stigma. Remember when no one really self-published? If you were a self-publisher, it was like, well, that's because you couldn't get published by a major publisher.
Exactly.
A writer would pay a vanity press to print the book, but stores rarely stocked them, and critics rarely reviewed them. And one of the reasons for this as well, that the self-publishers were mocked, I guess you'd say, is the fact that you had to have a distributor. And you almost just couldn't self-publish because the distributors would distribute the books. I'll tell you a real short story what happened to a friend of mine. She wrote a book. She was going to be on Maury Povich. She had got her book to a distributor. She went on the show and thinking because the distributor had the books that the books was in the stores. So she had nationwide publicity. She did the show. And she had, this was at a time when you didn't have the ebooks like you're talking about. So she had over 1 million hits on her website. And then when she called to find out, and then she found out a week later they shipped the books. Well, what happens is when you go and do publicity for your book, people are going to be listening to that title and they're going to go to the bookstore the next day, or if not the next day, the day after that, or the day after that. But after a week, they're not going to ask about your book anymore. And until that book is in the stores, the bookstores don't even know it exists, or at least that's the way it used to be. Well, then when she found out that happened, now the books are there, they're on the shelves. Well, it used to be if your books sat on the shelves for more than 3 months, the bookstore shipped them back. And when they ship them back, they rip off the cover.
Right.
So now they cannot be redistributed. So you've lost all of that. So that's exactly what happened to her. Now she goes on Howard Stern. Her book was The Brothel Bible, by the way. And she goes on Howard Stern. And again, millions of hits on her website. And she's calling a distributor to find out. And then she found out they had sent the books back before she went on Howard Stern.
Oh, no.
So there's a valuable lesson there that, when you do your publicity for anything you're doing, make sure you have that book readily available. Now you have the ebook, so it's not, that difficult, but
yeah, but oh my God, what a disaster.
Oh, it was a huge disaster. And the thing is the woman was doing very well with sales, in the local stores, where she had hands-on distribution. But that was really a sad story. I'm going to go into a little bit about a commercial or trade publisher. A commercial or trade publisher purchases the right to publish a manuscript, usually together with other rights known as subsidiary rights. Most pay in advance on royalties. Commercial publishers are highly selective, publishing only a tiny percentage of manuscripts submitted. They handle every aspect of editing, publication, distribution, and marketing. They are no cost to the author. The author, in return gets royalty checks. Now, this is kind of what you're doing, right, Oksana?
Yes,
that
is exactly.
So you'll get a royalty based on sales. And
after you earn out your advance.
Right.
Of course, if you sell foreign rights, then you can earn out your advance triple and quadruple times.
Exactly. Now, Morgan, you and I were talking about this earlier, about how there's an advantage and disadvantage to having a commercial publisher. It depends on the book, really.
Right, and it depends on what you want it to do for you and how you envision your market, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Like my mystery books, they're all through traditional publishers, and same situation. Advance, earn out the advance, get the royalties, go buy an ice cream cone. But no, they're all with traditional publishers. When I had a book that was a back of the house book, by self-publishing it, I make a much greater amount on every book that's sold. And yes, I had upfront costs, but that earns out pretty quickly.
Yes.
And if you have that, what's called a platform, and the platform is the following or the market that you've built of people who will buy your books. And if you have a specific platform and you self-publish, then when you're selling books after a presentation, you're making a lot more per every book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, the other thing is if you need the book quickly, or I might add one other thing is if I were self-publishing a book, I would only do it with a book that I wrote myself. I write with a lot of co-authors, too. And I think my epitaph will say she wrote well with others. But the thing is, I know myself I'm an A-type, and if I did a self-published book with a co-author, I'd be doing about 90% of the work.
Well, I think what we talked about this as well. There is a place for obviously the commercial publisher in that they take the hardest part of it out of your hands. You've written the book. They do your promotions for you. They do all the editing. You know, they really take a lot. Now, you are getting a royalty check as opposed to like you're talking about. You know, instead of earning like 30 or 40% commission.
But they also absorb the returns.
But they right.
But
and
also,
that's a biggie.
you know, as a self-published author, most self-published authors will never earn out what they paid for their
Most
books.
self-published authors sell less than 1,000 copies of their book.
So they have to, you know, it's almost like a balance. There really isn't as much difference as people think between being traditionally published and self-published. It's just more difficult to be a traditionally published author. But I think the success rate is very similar in both.
You are right. Yeah, because even with we had this on the show as well that no matter whether you're published through a traditional house or self-published, most authors sell less than 1,000 books. It's the elite few at the top that sell millions. You know.
Exactly. And the one advantage of a traditional publisher is that you also have that very important relationship with, you know, hopefully a great editor. Which 99% of writers need.
Yes.
So
I think one of the advantages as well with having a commercial house is the fact that they can open doors for you. Let's say your book were to be made into a movie. They do have those contacts. So that
they make those contacts for you.
Right.
They go out and pitch your book
to
as many people as they can.
Our vanity or subsidiary publisher charges a fee to produce a book, yet still presents itself as a publisher. There's a wide variety of models for vanity and subsidiary publishing, from companies that do little more than produce a print run that's shipped to the author, to companies that provide a menu of design, editing, distribution, and marketing services in addition to book production. Vanity presses or something like Ex Libra, it's just one that I can think of offhand. And they basically package the whole book for you. They do what you were talking about with the editing, but then they charge you a tremendous fee.
A right arm and a left leg.
Absolutely. And then the problem with what I have with subsidiary or vanity publishers is that it costs you so much for the book that when you go to sell it, you're paying already retail before you go out to sell it to someone else. So you have a hard time selling that book.
Well, and with the discounts that distributors demand, you basically have a horrible time there, you know, if it's a vanity. Again, because of the costs of the books, and, you know, the distributors take a huge chunk out.
Right, and you know, I have a friend who spent a great deal of money getting his book done through a vanity press, and they then came back and said, we can do a thing for you to sell to the movie industry, and they charge a tremendous amount of money to put this package together you could have done on your own. I'm sure they're there and they're great for some people, but I think I would go with the self-publishing on my own.
They load on all the other ancillary things too, like charging you, you know, 3 and 4 times the price for bookmarks, for business cards, for brochures, for all the different things, and you have to be careful of the quality, because just because they're a vanity publisher doesn't mean that they know what they're doing.
Now, print on demand is sort of along the line of self-publishing. Print on demand is that you actually order a specific amount of books, or they'll often ship for you. You can find some print on demand companies that aren't as much as a lot of vanity presses or whatever, and you have a little more control. I think what's interesting is that when you deal with either print on demand or vanity press, specifically vanity press, is that you lose control of your ISBNs because you don't have your own. You know, you're not your own publisher. You know, someone's publishing for you.
Can I add something in on that? If somebody is going to self-publish and they want their own ISBN numbers, the resource is Bowkers, Bowkers, and it is very prudent to buy at least a block of 10, because you will pay $250 for a block of 10, whereas you'll pay about $125 or something for one.
Right, because, and the way that works is like, let's say you only need 1 or 2 now, but you revise that book. When you revise that book, you have to have a new ISBN.
You also need different ISBN numbers for different versions of it.
True.
If you do an audio book, an e-book, paperback, hardback, they all have different ISBN numbers.
Yeah. So a true self-publisher like vanity publishing requires the author to bear the entire cost of publication and also leaves marketing and promotion to the author. However, rather than paying for preset packages services, the author puts those services together himself. Because every aspect of the process can be out to bid, self-publishing can be much more cost-effective than vanity publishing. It can also result in higher quality product, which is true. You know, if you self-publish and you're smart enough, you can control every phase of that. The book cover, the whole 9 yards. I mean, if you get a graphic artist, you can say, I don't like this, I like that. So you really do have hands-on with everything that happens. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I agree with that, because a lot of times when these vanity companies offer a package, they've got generic covers. 9 times out of 10, if you look at the cover when it's up on Amazon or wherever it is, you go, oh, that's a self-published one, because it's a cover that you've seen on
you can very
other
easily
books.
tell
And
the quality.
And also some of the setups and so forth, and then they have the stepped-up packages, you know, like zirconium,
right,
up to diamond to platinum, you know, and you look at the little things that you get for that bit of extra money, and you're really not getting that much.
I do need to mention that last show we talked about copyright, and I was telling everyone it's important to have your copyright.
Yes.
There are some publishing companies that do not want you to get the copyright. And basically, when I say copyright, you're copywritten anyway once you've created the work. But registration is really what I'm getting at. Register your work with the Library of Congress.
Right.
But there are some agents that require a copyright, and there are some that do not. So you just need to know who you're dealing with and who you're targeting when you're out there. On last week's show, Kenneth called in and asked about iBook Author, and we mentioned that a while ago, how that's one of the apps for Mac on that you can take even Word documents and recreate those. We're at the last minute of the show, so on next week's show, I'm going to let you know that funding our project will be about funding your project and agents. Our panel will discuss the various ways to fund your project and offer advice on whether you should acquire an agent, and if so, how. My guests will be authors Brian Yates and Kevin Parsons. I'd like to thank my guests Morgan St. James, Oksana Marfiotti, and Anthony. Anthony, are you there?
Harakai.
Yeah, there you go. You can find links and information about all my guests on the Aspects of Writing website. Aspects of Writing broadcasts live every Monday here on KLAV and on the internet at www.klav1230am.com. Future air dates are also on Aspects of Writing. And remember, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing right here on KLAV.
This last show was very informative. I was fortunate enough to be on the internet that morning searching for funding companies to talk about on our show. I came across an article that was written about this one gentleman, and his phone number was listed. I gave him a call, told him what my show was about that evening, and he agreed to be on the show. The topic of the show was funding your project and agents, and on that show our panel discussed the various ways you can fund your project, and they offered advice on whether you should acquire an agent, and if so, how. My guests were authors Kevin Parsons and author Eric Bowman, and Eric Bowman was not only a former author, but is also the owner of author.com, a company designed to fund and promote book projects. This show was not as light and humorous as past shows, but very valuable to an up-and-coming author wishing to get their work published and noticed. Enjoy.
Views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of KLAV.
Welcome to Aspects of Writing with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. The phone lines are open at 731-1230. That's 731-1230, or toll free 1-866-820-KLAV. Now, let's get writing. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Hello, and welcome to Aspects of Writing. This is your host, James Kelly. On tonight's show, my guests are going to be author Kevin Parsons, and via telephone from Los Angeles, author Eric Bowman. Kevin is the author of Life Choice, Pursuing Your Passions, and has written a children's story, Ken Johnson and Roxy the Rocker. And then Eric is not only an author, but he is the owner of a new company called author.com, and we're going to talk more about that later on in the show. The topic of our show tonight is funding your project and agents. Our panel will discuss the various ways to fund your project and offer advice on whether you should acquire an agent, and if so, how. I always like to start the show with a few quotes. Kevin, would you like to take the first one?
Sure. There are books of which the backs and covers are by far the best parts. And that's by Charles Dickens.
All right. And the second one is Tom Clancy wrote, "The difference between fiction and reality. Fiction has to make sense." Eric, are you there?
I'm here.
How would you like to take number 3?
I'll take it.
All right.
Author Robert Benchley wrote, it took me 15 years to discover that I had no talent for writing, but I couldn't give it up because by that time I was too famous.
And Kevin, how about number 4?
Hell hath no fury like a hustler with a literary agent, and that's by Frank Sinatra.
Yeah. And the last one is former baseball player and author Jim Bouton wrote about money and fame. Back then, if you had a sore arm, the only people concerned were you and your wife. Now it's you, your wife, your agent, your investment counselor, your stockbroker, and your publisher. If you are just now tuning in, you are listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, right here on KLAV in Las Vegas. Before we get into the topic of the day, funding your project and agents, I'd like to introduce my guests and let them tell you a little bit about themselves. And when they have finished, I'll have a few questions for them. Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Right. I wrote and self-published a book called Ken Johnson and Roxy the Rocker, and it's a children's illustrated book for children 4 to 6 years old. And self-published that, and I actually used it as a marketing tool for my construction business first, and then the story was compelling, and so I published it without the usual propaganda on the back about how wonderful my company was, and put our bios on the back and sold it commercially.
Okay.
And then I've also been published in numerous magazines. I'm a motorcycle enthusiast, and we'll probably get to that, but Honda Red Rider magazine, Racer X magazine, Cycle News, and then last month I was a feature article in American Motorcyclist magazine.
Oh,
I had
cool.
the cover and a 6-page feature story with pictures.
And you just finished a writers' conference as well, where you were a host?
Right, the Las Vegas Writers Conference. Yeah, I emceed a bunch of it, so
Yeah,
that was really
absolutely.
exciting. Yeah.
And Eric, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. I actually backed into writing and publishing back in 2003 when I launched a training company. I actually hired a writer and published a PDF textbook distributed exclusively as part of an online training program. I sold that company, and then in 2005, I personally wrote the curriculum for the Certified Entrepreneur Program. I spent the next few years teaching, consulting for business startups, and training people on SEO and what's now called social media marketing. I learned a lot about both the writing and the publishing process, from starting my own imprint to turning a book into a bestseller. I discovered that funding and then selling a writer's book were two of the biggest obstacles a writer faces. Most writers are not business savvy.
Right.
That's why I developed author.com.
Eric, how many books have you written now?
I think about 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm. And are all of them along the field of the publishing industry?
Well, I mean, there's 2 that are specifically targeted at entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
The last 3 that I put out are just simple ebooks. Those are targeted specifically at publishing, writing your book, getting funding for your book, and publishing your book as an ebook, and then turning it into a bestseller.
And we're actually going to get into it a little bit later in this show, because I'm very interested in what you have to tell our guests when it comes to funding. But for right now, I'm going to ask Kevin what inspired him to write his first novel.
Yeah, I didn't allude to that in our biography period, but I've written 5 novels, and they're 5 manuscripts. And it was about 10 years ago, and I wanted to write novels, Christian fiction,
Yes.
and mostly about men who overcome, they're more character-driven, and it's about men overcoming odds and overcoming obstacles in their life,
mm-hmm.
and becoming better men. So I started that, and the first one was a 3-book series, and then I've written 2 other books as well.
And then the children's story.
And then the children's book, yeah, and that was the one I talked about where I wanted to use it to market my own company.
Oh, okay.
And then turned it around.
Yeah, because you actually do have an agent for your other.
Yes, and so I to pitch my books, I went to writers' conferences, and I found a guy, Terry Burns, is my literary agent from Heartline Literary Agency.
What advice would you give an up-and-coming writer or author trying to break in the business?
That it takes persistence. That if you have one book in you and you think you're going to get write that book and get published, you may be in for a surprise. Because my experience has been, for instance, it's like running a marathon. You don't just put on some running shoes and run a marathon. You might run one and get leg cramps and not finish. You might have troubles, and it's the same with your book. It's a skill. And so you may write a good manuscript, but it's not a great one. And so you can pitch that and you can work at that, but you got to keep writing and keep writing other manuscripts and then attending conferences, attending critique groups, working on your skill, working on your craft, and developing better and better books.
Mm-hmm.
And you may never ever publish the first or second or third book.
Where can our listeners learn more about your books?
They could get on my website, which is kevinbparsons.com.
Okay.
And then I'm blogging every day, too, at kevinbparsons.blogspot.com.
All right. And I know you have a project coming up called 50 States in 50 Weeks. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, my passion is motorcycles. I started racing and riding motorcycles when I was 13. And when I was 16, I went to a movie theater with a friend of mine, and we saw the movie Easy Rider, which is a terrible movie, but it had great cinematography of these guys riding in the country. And we were hooked. We wanted to ride motorcycles around the country. And so we decided that when we graduated from high school, that's what we were going to do. But we had girlfriends, and the girlfriends turned into wives, and, and then we had kids, then we had a business. And
so
then
that dream kind of...
The dream really kind of died. And so then later in life, I realized that I could probably get some time away from my business when it was successful and do it. But business was going so good, it was really hard to break away. Yeah. And then in 2009, our business here in Las Vegas, we were in residential construction business. Mm-hmm. So that business evaporated.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then about 2 years ago, my wife said, why don't let's go now. The kids are grown, the business is gone, and we did some good financial investments and smart work with our money, and so we're okay. And so let's do it now. And so this coming Sunday is when we're going to start on our 50
Where can
States
people
in 50
learn
weeks.
more about 50 States in 50 Weeks?
They can go to 50statesin50weeks.com, and that's 50 statesin50weeks.com.
Okay. All right.
And I'll take a right to our blog.
Great. Now, Eric, what inspired you to write?
What inspired me to write?
Well, I know yours they're more technical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you get right down to it, it was financial gain.
Wow.
Sorry.
That's great. No, it's funny.
Well, hey, that's honest, and that's good. There's a lot of people out who write just for the money.
There's so many people that talk about they write for the passion, and you need to write for money. A lot of people need to write for money,
An honest person.
People that are passionate about writing.
Yeah, I need to see that check in the mail.
But I know you're also self-published. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah. I mean, I established my own imprints so I could publish without seeming like I was self-publishing, but realistically, it was self-published.
Mm-hmm.
All of my books are.
Okay. So I guess the advice you would give someone who wants to be a writer, at least from the vantage point you have, is just jump in and do it.
Well, actually, no. I mean, see, I'm impressed with Kevin that he actually has an agent because I've never experienced that. So I'd like to hear his perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, from an advice standpoint, the first thing I tell people is to plan it before you write it, and to figure out who your audience is, what they'll be most interested in, and try to involve them in the planning stages of your book. Because if you write a book that has no audience, nobody's going to read it, and I feel that books are written to be read.
Yeah, Kevin?
Yeah, that's true. I know an author who wrote a book about abortion, and no one wants to read it. And so it's supposed to be this profound book, and I'm sure it is, and it could be a great book, but no one's going to buy it. And then when you pitch it to a publisher or an agent, they say they sound cold-hearted and callous, but they're in the business of selling books.
Right. Yeah.
So you do have to find a market that's willing to buy your book. And then a lot of people will write too few or too many words. And they have limitations on, they have parameters of how many words a book should be written. So if you have this book that's 120,000 words and it's great, and you just can't take any words out of it, and they want 80, you're out of luck.
Well, a publishing house puts a lot of time and effort and money into the project, and you really don't. Unlike when you're self-published. So I can understand from where they're coming from, you have to meet their parameters. So
yes, and so that you have to be aware of that.
Eric, where can listeners learn more about your books?
Well, I mean, you could certainly go to my main website, which is Eric Bowman. It's ERIK Bowman, B as in boy, OWMAN.com, or directly to Author, which is AUTHR.com.
Okay. I'd like to remind our listeners that you're listening to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV with me, your host, James Kelly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our topic tonight, which is funding your project and agents. And I'd like to tell the listeners that if you have questions or comments about the show, you can call in at 702-731-1230, or if you're out of the prefix or out of state, you can call in at 1-866-820-5528. All right, we'll go right into funding your project. Eric, you have a unique concept because I actually discovered you on the internet because you actually created a company to help with the funding. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is that the two biggest obstacles writers face are finding the funding up front to write their book, to schedule the time, to block out time to actually write their book. And then at the other end of the spectrum is when they get done with it, to try to sell it. And so I created Author to address that. Author allows you to do crowdfunding, to find other people, friends, family, fans, and followers to actually donate money. Usually it's with the expectation that they'll receive a copy of your book as an incentive to donate. And then there's also the point about pre-selling your book, which is a huge, huge thing to actually pre-sell your book to your friends, family, and followers and fans. And a lot of authors don't even consider that because they're going after the book advance, which I think we all know that that's kind of out there most of the time. And today, at the best, it's 5,000 or 10,000.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that's unique also about what you're trying to do is, unlike we're going to say the words Kickstarter and Indiegogo, your company actually doesn't hold the money in escrow. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, when you're actually writing a book, you need that money right away. And if you set up a campaign through one of those other services, which will be remain unnamed, if you start a campaign through one of those services and you set it for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, if you ever see that money at all, you won't see that money for 30, 60, or 90 days. With Author, we do an immediate transfer. If you get a $20 donation today, we transfer that money through PayPal directly to your PayPal account, and you end up with that $20 in your hand.
Right. So you're not waiting for the funds to actually start your project. You actually can start money immediately to start your project.
Yeah, and I think that was that is a big failure with the other companies that are out there. Is that, I mean, they have that float where they actually earn the interest on your money that they're holding for you.
Well, and they charge a huge percentage too.
It is a large percentage, and if you don't raise the money that your target goal of let's say you want to raise $5,000 and you raise $4,500, they will basically refund all the money to the donors, and you'll end up with nothing, even after all the effort you put into promoting your page.
Absolutely, you walk away with nothing in your pocket.
Yeah.
And the one thing I know for certain with those two companies, I won't say their name again, that they really take 10%, because I think it's the one company takes 2.7. And then the company that does the funding for them gets, 6.5 or something. So it ends up being almost 10%, but that they take of the money you raised. So when you're looking at $3,000, you figure you've already lost, 300 of that.
Right.
That's what's kind of unique about your company too. The other thing I think I like what you were telling me about what you do, as opposed, you don't take a percentage. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. What we've determined, when we did some research into this, and we priced our service at $14.95 per month, and we don't charge a percentage of any of the money you raise. So it's just a flat $14.95 per month to use the service, and with that comes an author page, so you get a page to add some credibility to yourself as a writer. Plus, you get the book page, and the book page itself transforms. So you may set it up as a campaign to raise donations for your book project, but once your campaign ends, say in 30 or 60 days, that page will automatically transform into a book pre-sales page.
And
so
I think
you can continue. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think what the listeners need to understand and what's different with your company as opposed to some of the other funding companies is that when that campaign ends, your association with that company ends.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why yours is unique in that you are able to transform that into something else as opposed to just being a way to raise the money. Now you have a site to keep your book online and continue with it from there.
Yeah, and I've got search engine optimization background and social media marketing background personally, and I know how much effort it takes for anyone, let alone an author, to promote a book donation, a crowdfunding campaign page. I mean, they might spend 3 hours a day just promoting that page, and then when their campaign ends, all that effort they put into it, if you used one of the other services, is out the window. It's gone. But with our service, all that effort continues. All your rankings in Google, all the links you've created at other sites and forums and blogs, those are all still valid and functional and working for you to pre-sell your book. And then once you actually publish your book, you can use that same page to market and sell your book because we have direct links to wherever you happen to be selling your book at.
So in that sense, basically, it's no different than if you created a website anyway.
It really is. If you don't have the wherewithal or the time to create your own blog site or your own website, we give you an author page for free. You don't have to pay anything for that ever. And then we give you a book marketing page, in essence, which has a description of you, a description of your book project. You can upload a video. I mean, a lot of the same services that you can get somewhere else, like the video hosting and things like that. But on top of that, we provide you with QR codes if you wanted to put QR codes in your printed book to make it interactive. That's all included in the monthly fee. And we actually have a book proposal builder to help you, again, like I said earlier, plan it before you write it.
Right.
And that's all included as well. And there's also an ebook cover designer, which is all built in, and that's free to use as well.
Yeah, so you have, I think what's really unique about this service is the fact that you can continue with this. The reason is what we talked about earlier today is that your background's in SEO and the fact that you have already driven business to that site for that author. So if they continue with that site afterwards, they already have, I guess, a ranking is what you would say.
Yeah, in fact, I think what I mentioned to you, which is once you create and activate your book project page at Author, based on our SEO that we've already done, your book project will be ranked in Google probably within a week, maybe a little bit longer, but typically it's a week or less. And that will automatically start driving people searching for the topics within your book to your book page.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kevin, when you self-published your book, how did you go about it? Was the funding out of your pocket or?
Totally 100% out of my pocket, yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest story you're going to hear from most self-published authors is that they footed the bill.
Right, yeah. And the disadvantage of that is, you're on your own. And when I did it, it was my first book. I didn't know what I was doing. I needed it for my own business, which it was a great marketing tool. Mm-hmm. It really worked well because instead of giving your customer a brochure that he's going to throw right into the wastebasket, you give him a book mm-hmm. that he's never going to throw away. He's going to take it home. Now, your advertising medium is inside his house. Mm-hmm. So it was a great advantage for that. So, but as far as selling it commercially, I put it on Amazon. I spent all the money to get it published, and it languished on Amazon. I have boxes of books. So I am the horror story that people talk about. You self-publish and you have all these books, and
I've heard that so many times.
Yeah, and it's a children's book. It's not very big, and there's a couple thousand of them. It's not the end of the world because I'm in the Henderson Writers Group, and there's some horror stories of people that have published like 30 books, and they give them to their friends and relatives who probably hate them by now, and they have garage full of books, you know. And so it's just.
But I think the sad thing is it's not necessarily that the book isn't even good. It's just that no one has heard of it or or getting it distributed. Because we've talked about this on past shows as well, in that it's difficult now to get your books in the bookstores, even in a local level. You know, it's very difficult.
Right, and then everyone's wrestling for shelf space, and so you might even get in and you're back in a corner somewhere.
Right. So. Yeah, and unless you do an event, no one's going to even know who you are,
right.
And the stores aren't so keen on events anymore. That's why I think you're going to see ebook publishing really dominate here very soon. So.
It's really taking off, yeah. My concern, and I think it's not as bad as I thought, but is that anybody can now publish a book, and so anybody does, and the quality of books can suffer. But I just believe that they're going to fade away. I mean, you can e-publish a book, and it doesn't cost you anything, but you don't get anything either, so I think those people are going to fade away, and the cream is going to rise at the top.
Right. I'm sure that it'll, like you said. But what I like, though, about companies like what Eric has started is the fact that you're giving people an opportunity that they may not have otherwise. Because we're going to go into agents here in a minute, but Kevin, that it isn't that easy to find an agent. I mean, you went to great lengths to get your agent.
Yes.
So. I'm going to read a little bit about agents, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the agents. And Eric, you actually have something you need to bring up, I believe, about your company and agents and how you've actually helped them. But I'm going to read this a little bit. It's about agents. This comes off the internet from, and this is nothing to do with drugs, but it's freebase.com. A literary agent, often synonymous with publishing agent, is an agent who represents writers and their written work to publishers, theatrical producers, and film producers, and assists in the sale and deal negotiation of the same. Literary agents most often represent novelists, screenwriters, and major nonfiction writers. They are paid a fixed percentage, 10 to 20%, 15% as usual, of the proceeds of sales. They negotiate on behalf of their clients. While literary agents exist largely to provide services to authors, they also assist publishing houses and others in expediting the process of review, publication, distribution of authors' works. Quite a few well-known, powerful, and lucrative publishing houses do not accept non-agent submissions, and I've experienced that myself. You know, you have to have an agent. I have a good story behind that one. A knowledgeable agent knows the market and can be a source of valuable career advice and guidance. Being a publishable author doesn't automatically make someone an expert on modern publishing contracts and practices. And I think if you're self-published, and I know, Eric, you're self-published, I understand this completely in that there are some contracts that are difficult to understand.
Yes.
Because I have dealt with Borders and I have dealt with Barnes & Nobles in the past. So, it can be complicated. Here's what William Kane of ezinearticles.com has to say. The truth is that literary agents are people, just like you and me. I think so. They have lives outside the office, interests and concerns. When you hear them in a podcast or read an online review, sometimes they'll let slip some of their personal information. You can use that to your advantage if you can link it to your work. And here's an example. Let's say you are writing a comic novel and you come across a comment by an agent in which he says, "I just don't read enough funny stuff these days, and I love humor in fiction." Well, what a fun fact. This is the guy for you. You've got to add him to your short list of agents and queries. An example of that is if you're writing fiction, you want to go out there and you want to scour the market for agents who deal specifically with fiction, just like you do publishers deal with fiction, because they're going to have your interest at heart, and that's the person you want to market your work for you.
Right. Yeah, the challenge is to find the right agent that fits for you. A lot of times at conferences, you'll go pitch to an agent, and you'll tell him, like, for instance, I write Christian thriller, and he goes, "Well, I don't do thriller." Great. You're just wasting everybody's time.
Right.
And so it's very important to study that agent, his website, and find out what he is representing. And then if you get a right fit, you've got a head start there when you pitch to him.
Well, and advice is to do your homework, browse the web. You're going to stumble across some fun facts about literary agents, facts that might help you get that agent to sell your book. You want to make it fun, and do not pay for an agent. No, you haven't done that, have you?
No. See, I
have.
learned my lesson. Yeah, and so the agent makes a percentage of the books he sells, and that's why it's kind of a hard sell, because an agent doesn't want to take a lot of risk on you. He's not going to make a cent until he sells your book. So
well, I'm gonna tell a little story here about this. Is a true story that honestly happened with me. I didn't feel like when I started publishing, I'd set up my own office, my own publishing company in Atlanta, Georgia, and I didn't feel that I needed an agent. But then the book that I was pushing, what happened was I thought, well, this is easy. I'll just go out and I'll find an actor that I want to be in my movie, and I'll just call that actor and ask him to be a part of the movie.
Wow.
You gotta realize this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I honestly did that. I actually went and got one of their videos, saw which studio produced their work. Happened to be Universal Studios.
Wow.
Called Universal Studios.
This is great.
I'm going to mention names because this is true. It was Tom Cruise. I thought he'd be great for the first book I had, which was
Wouldn't
The
he?
Emblem.
Yeah.
So I call. I write under one name, and then my real name is a different name. So I call, and I had actually sent the book, to be honest with you. I actually sent the book to Universal Studios, to Tom Cruise and his agent at the time, which was Paula Wagner. So I guess they had the book, and I call, and the person who answered the phone said, "Who are you calling about?" And I said, I'm calling for Mr. Cruise. And they go, "Well, who is this?" And I gave him my real name. And then they said, "Well, does he know you're calling?" And I go, "Yeah." "And what is this about?" I said, "It's about a book that I sent him that I'm trying to make a movie out of." "Oh, well, they're in Universal Studios in Florida right now wrapping up a shoot. Let me give you the number there."
No kidding?
Because I had given him my real name, and then I write under a different name. And they knew the name was different than the book
right.
that I had sent. So I called down there. They gave me the number to the trailer. That was Tom's trailer. And Paula Wagner, who was his agent at the time, picked up the phone. She wanted to know what I was calling about and who gave me the number, and I told her, and she said, "Oh, so this is about the book." And I don't know if she really had seen the book or not, but she said, "Well, yeah, I'm sure he has. You know what? Tom left already and went back to L.A. I'm closing up the trailer now, and I'm going to be heading off this evening to go back to L.A. Let me give you my number there.
Oh, my God.
Call me in a couple days."
Wow.
So, and this all has to do with agents, so hang in there. So anyway, so what happened was now a couple days had gone by. Apparently, Paula decided to do her homework. They probably found the book I sent them.
Right.
Realized from the information inside the book that I was one and the same. So when I called, the first thing she did was start laughing.
Oh,
and she was giggling, and she says, "You wouldn't happen to be James Kelly as well, would you?" And I said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I am." And then that's when she really started laughing. She says, "You're new at this, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Well, let me just give you some advice. First of all, we couldn't talk to you even if we wanted to. You have to have an agent.
Right.
Because in this business, we're not allowed to speak to you unless you have an agent." So that is my story on how I learned I had to go out and get an agent.
So you were just too dumb to know you couldn't do it, huh?
And it was innocent. It was so innocent.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't lie. I didn't pretend to be someone I wasn't. But I didn't think about them thinking I was two different people either.
That's amazing, though, that you got through to her.
I got through to her.
agent, to Tom Cruise's agent. That is amazing.
And now she's his business partner.
Wow.
But anyway, that's why you need an agent. Because if you go out there knocking on doors without an agent, you're going to get rejected.
You're not going to get anywhere.
No.
Yeah.
So, all right, Kevin, you have an agent. Can you explain to us a little bit about how you went about that?
Yes, I attend writers' conferences, and so I went to the American Christian Fiction Writers Conference. I think it was the third one I went to in St. Louis. And I went there and pitched my book. It was my first novel, Silent Night, Holy War. And it's about a church that's attacked by terrorists on Christmas Eve, during a Christmas Eve candlelight service, and how the pastor and the church struggle to rebuild their lives and rebuild the church from the attack. And so I had practice pitches with my Henderson Writers Group, and I pitched it to other people and got no. And went to Terry Burns with a Heartline Agency. And he's a true cowboy. I mean, he wears a cowboy hat, and he lives in Texas, and and he writes westerns himself too. And pitched the book, and he said, "This sounds good," and send me 50 pages. So great. So I sent him 50 pages. He liked it, And then I sent him the manuscript, and he liked it. So, and that was a couple years ago. And this isn't one of those happily ever after stories. I
Right.
still am not published as far as novels. I've published anthologies, I've published articles, but I haven't made that leap into an agent represents me, finds a publisher, and gets a novel published. So.
But you at least accomplished the task of getting an agent, which is just
That's
as
a big
difficult.
hurdle, yeah.
It's just as difficult to get an agent sometimes as it is to find a publisher.
That's true, yeah.
And there are publishing houses out there that you can approach that you don't have to have an agent for.
Yeah, it's a little tougher. And you can query a publisher, and they get like 300 query letters a month. And so they just whip through them. And so you better have a knock them out of the park, great query letter if you want to stand out and not end up in the slush pile.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, you were telling me earlier that agents actually sometimes contact you.
Yeah, in fact, I was planning on working with independent publishers as well as literary agents, but I hadn't actually started reaching out yet because, again, the site's only been up for about a month and a half now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just got a cold call one day from a literary agent in San Diego, and the first thing she said was, "I love your website. I love the concept." And she said, "It's going to be really big." And I went, "That's good to hear from somebody who might be my nemesis."
That's nice.
But what she said was, the site itself is a good proving ground for new and aspiring authors that are looking for agents, because now she can just go through the site and read their bios and their overviews of their books and pick and choose directly from people that are basically have their hands up looking to be noticed.
Wow, that's an upside down way for agents and authors to get together. That's great.
Yeah, it's really so your service really has a lot of advantages to it in that respect. Because actually, the author wouldn't even know someone's looking at it unless you let them know.
Well, yeah, it's a two-way street. That's pretty cool because the authors can look at it. The authors can pitch themselves, but the agents can actually go there and actively pursue authors. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, on the agent topic, I mean, I've talked to a lot of aspiring writers over the last couple of years, and they suffer from this thing called what they call analysis paralysis. It's really they've written a book proposal and they sent it out to a bunch of agents, and they're not writing their book because they're waiting to be picked up. And so I knew this woman. Mm-hmm. I knew this woman who spent 9 months trying to get somebody to pick up her book, but in that 9 months, she could have written it.
You know what else is tragic, Eric? Is there are a lot of good authors out there that write good books that can't write a decent proposal.
Yeah.
And how do you communicate well what your book is about?
But I think the good thing about what Eric started here is that you're not even writing a proposal. If he has agents looking at the site anyway, they're going to base it on what they see. And all books have a synopsis on the back to give you an idea what the story's about. So in a way, you supersede that and don't even need it because that agent's looking at you.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
But I still strongly encourage people to plan their book before they write it, and that's in essence writing a book proposal. And so I built a questionnaire within the site where you can go through and answer a bunch of questions, figure out what you're writing for, figure out who your audience is going to be, the focus of your book, and actually put in chapters of your book or at least outline summaries of chapters. And then you can actually share that securely with anybody you want. So if you have a literary agent on the hook, then you can actually send them a URL and a password, and then go in and look at your book proposal online.
So you've built in the book proposal in the $14.95 a month.
Yeah. Well, that's actually free. You get that just for signing up, and we don't charge you anything to use the site until you want to activate your book project page.
Wow, that's cool.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
I will tell you this is another experience of mine, of Hard Knocks. One of the things you have to learn when you're looking for an agent, this is so important. When I was told I needed an agent, I didn't know how to go about getting one. I went through the literary agents book in the library.
Right.
And I was researching, and I found one, and I called. Well, I actually approached several, and the one I called, they didn't charge a fee per se a monthly fee for their service, but what they did is they said, you have to send us X amount of dollars to cover postage and everything else. I'm thinking, that sounds reasonable to me. But unfortunately, when you're going after an agent, that is not a good thing either.
No, it's not.
Because what happens is those type agents will take on 300 or 400 clients because you're paying them up front anyway, whether you think you are or not. When they say you're paying for postage, you're really paying for them in advance. And they make a good living at that. So I learned the hard way with that as well. That is not the way you go about getting an agent.
You're my kind of guy. I'm the same. Ready, fire, aim. Ready, fire, aim.
Well, when you're new in this business and you don't have anyone to guide you, which is what this show is about,
to do,
is to enlighten people and let them know what's out there.
Right.
You're stumbling along and you're doing anything. You're desperate. You're doing anything and everything you can to try and get yourself noticed.
Yeah.
And you're going to make mistakes along the way, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you will. We're hoping that we can help you eliminate a few of those mistakes by this show. So
great.
By the way, there. I don't know about every state, but I'm certain that California does, and Nevada probably does as well. There's a website for the government where you can actually check to see if a literary agent is actually licensed and a legitimate literary agent. Because you mentioned that they were charging you somehow up front,
right?
And it's illegal in the state of California for a literary agent, somebody who calls themselves an agent, to charge any fees whatsoever.
Well, actually, the way they were getting around that, Eric, wasn't they weren't saying they were charging you a fee. They were saying they needed X amount of funds to cover postage when they sent your book out, and that's how they got around it.
Huh.
There's another website too that helps. It's called Predators and Editors.
Oh yes,
you remember that?
Yeah,
and they call through the snakes and identify them for you, so you know who's.
But it's terrible. But there's a lot of people out there. That's how they make their living. So you just have to be very careful. Yeah. Kevin, I have a couple more fun facts we're gonna read because we might be able to create a little conversation. Now, how would you like to take number one?
Sure. Beatrix Potter, having been rejected by various publishers, proceeded to self-publish a limited edition of The Tale of Peter Rabbit in 1901. Only 250 copies were printed. Publisher Fred Warren, who had also rejected Peter Rabbit, changed his mind when he saw the finished product. It seemed The Tale of Peter Rabbit had commercial possibilities after all. It was published with color illustrations in 1902. Since then, Ms. Potter's picture book about a Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail has sold over 40 million copies. And it's still selling. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So when you have your self-published book there, just keep in mind this little tale right here. And that.
Yeah, there was another one lately called The Shack, and that was self-published, and that sold millions of copies.
Yeah, we went over last show on there's a couple of new authors out there who have done unbelievably well in the ebook market.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Eric, would you like to read number two?
Sure thing. George Bernard Shaw is quoted as having said, "A life spent making mistakes is not only more honorable, but more useful than a life spent doing nothing."
That's so true.
I like that. Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. Groucho Marx once said, "The secret of life is honesty and fair dealing. If you can fake that, you've got it made." That kind of goes along with some of the topics we're talking with agents and so forth. The last one is I like prefixes. I read them. Sometimes I do not read any further. That's a quote from Malcolm Lowry.
Nice.
We're going to talk a little bit about marketing and distribution because it does play into what Eric does as well. And I think from what you were explaining to me earlier today, your company deals a little bit with that, or certainly when it comes to the ebooks.
Sure. And I was describing the way the book project page transforms from a crowdfunding page to a book pre-sales page, and then finally into a marketing and sales page. Because of all the effort you've spent promoting that one page, when people search for some topic that's within your description on Google, end up at your page, there are links directly to whatever, if you publish through Lulu or have a book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any other site out there, you can actually put the links in and have direct links to those basically shopping carts where people can buy your book.
Okay. So any of the ebook distributors, you would be able to link right into those as well then?
Oh, absolutely.
Good. All right. One of the things that we're talking about, when someone goes to your site, they're completely a self-publisher. There is no vanity involved or anything like that. It's up to you to make the book happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the important thing to point out about Author is we don't offer directly any services, no writing coaching, no upsells of any sort. We don't actually do the publishing for you. You can use the site to promote your book to literary agents. You can and collect crowdfunding donations so that you can afford to maybe take some time off work and actually focus on writing your book, with the hopes of either self-publishing or getting picked up by a publisher.
Right. And again, would you explain one more time what crowd publishing is?
Oh, sure. Crowdfunding is basically it's having people donate. It's having a lot of people donate a little bit of money. So $5, $10, $15, $20 per person. If you get 100, 500, or 1,000 people donating to you $10, then you can afford to take some time off work and write your book, and possibly even self-publish it. Hire a good copy editor. Hire a good proofreader. If you want to do a really quality book, you can hire a layout person and have a quality book cover designed.
Hey, Eric, can you help me here? So those are those investors?
No, they're not investors. These are people that are donating small amounts of money to you with the expectation, typically, it's either out of their own goodwill or they're expecting to get some sort of incentive from you, like a copy of your book when it's published.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to enlighten him a little bit of what happened with me, and actually how the show came about is I helped a young lady with her book. She came to me, she had it roughly written, she needed to have it edited, and that's where I stepped in, and then she was uncertain what to do with the book once it was edited. So what I did then is I helped her package the book as far as cover design and everything, but she didn't have the money to get it published. So we went to another site and we went after funding, and actually crowdfunding is what we went after. What she did then is she took social media, which is your Twitter, your Facebook, your Google, and she basically told her friends or acquaintances that were friends on her websites, and she would say, like, for $3 I'll send you a free copy of the e-version. For $10, I'll send you a free copy. You know, if you donate, it's all donations. If you donate $10, I'll send you a free copy of my book when it comes out. Or if you send $25, I'll send you a free copy of my hardback. And from there, the incentives can go on. It depends on what you want to do. We did dinner with the author. There's various ways you can do this, and it's donations. You're not,
okay.
But for each level of donation, they get X, in return.
Okay.
But it's in no way an investment vehicle, although that is now legal as well through the legislation that just passed about a month ago. But this is strictly people. It's like you're playing a guitar and you have a cup out front, and people walk by and they like what you're doing.
That's a good way.
So they drop in $5.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are a lot of people who will actually say, I like your idea, I like your project, and they'll donate, and they don't even want an incentive. They just want to see you get published.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah.
So,
okay.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add to that, Eric?
Well, I don't want to try to sell stuff, but I do have a free ebook that I put together called "Get Paid to Write Your Book." You can buy it for 99 cents at Amazon, or you can get it for free at the author website. There's a follow-up book to that called Publish Your Ebook, or How to Publish Your Ebook, which is simple steps on how to move your book forward. And then the third book in that series is How to Make Your Book a Bestseller. And each one of those books builds upon the previous one. The first one, the reasons it's free is because it's primarily promoting the whole crowdfunding and book pre-sales concept. But those three little ebooks should be able to empower you to write your book, get paid to write your book, and promote your book.
And I'd also like to point out that when you keep saying author.com, it's spelled AUTHR.com. not
I
author.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because I've been told that it's a terrible name for the radio.
Well, we'll just say it's www.authr.com. So when you're looking for author.com, just go to authr.com.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And if you need more information, by the way, on Eric's website, you can go to the Aspects of Writing website at www.aspectsofwriting.com, and you'll see a little tag at the bottom of that page for Eric's company.
Great.
Okay. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit more here about the self-publishing, because since that's what Eric's company really sets you up to do, is to self-publish. I think people need to understand that when you're going after publishing, and even if you're going to use his service, you cannot go through a vanity publisher. Well, I guess you could, though, Eric, through yours. Is that correct? Because you're just raising the money to get it published, so if you want to pay a vanity publisher, you could.
Yeah, when I send out a marketing email to a writing coach or a vanity publisher, what I tell them is that send your clients to me. I will help them raise the money they need to pay for your services.
Ah, very good.
Uh-huh.
And it makes logical sense to me, because if I don't have the knowledge or the skill set or the wherewithal to actually be a self-publisher and publish my own book, I'm going to want to go to a vanity press or a self-publishing house, a small independent that may need some money up front, and I may not have the funds to do that.
Right.
So with Author, you could actually raise $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 and go back and get those skills that you don't have from people that have them.
I do have one question for you with your site, in regards to your site. And I know this is probably where it's a little different than the others. Right now, your site is set up, is it specifically for authors, or do you go into other aspects of writing as well?
All we do 100% is books.
Okay, all right. That's good to know.
And in fact, the whole site is based around, like I mentioned, e-cover builder, e-book cover builder, the book proposal builder. All those services are built around helping authors get their book published.
Okay, all right.
And I would say that self-publishing is changing, and that it used to have this scotoma of, it was just people, more vanity publishing. It was pretty much vanity
You were
publishing.
looked down on if you were self-publishing.
Yeah, and now, because the big publishers aren't putting the money into the writers like they used to, a lot of your writing, a lot of your marketing is your own. You still have to go out and push your book. So the advantage of a big publisher isn't like it used to be.
Right, and actually a service like what Eric offers helps motivate the author, to be honest with you.
Right.
Because now you are forced to go out there, and it really is up to you to go out there and push this project on his site, to go out there to your Facebooks and to your Googles, to the friends at work, to the friends you know off work, and say, hey, if they want a copy, say, instead of buying it from me, can you go to this site and fund it there? Because you get more notoriety that way. I mean, it's really a way of advertising if you think about it, because you're bringing people more attention to your website.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
And one powerful aspect of that is that your friends and family and followers and fans will probably buy a copy of your book once you publish it.
Correct.
With the author service, you can simply say, can you pre-purchase a copy of the book before I publish it? And that way, you're assured that you have sales.
Now, I need you to explain what you just said about the pre-author as opposed to the donation thing.
Sure. Donation is fairly straightforward, and you did a really good job explaining it. Where crowdfunding, you market your book, market your book page out to your friends, families, fans, and followers through Facebook and what have you. They come and they actually make a donation, and for potentially an incentive of a book or something. The pre-sales is simply a way for people to pay you up front. Mm-hmm. With the anticipation that you're going to send them a copy of their book once it's published. And what's interesting is the big publishers, the traditional publishing houses, they go to Amazon, they go to the big outlets, and they take pre-orders all the time for books that aren't going to be published for 3 months or 6 months out. Right. So they've always had this advantage, this uneven playing field, where they can actually take pre-orders through Amazon for full price from fans of that author.
Yeah.
Author. So what we're doing is we're allowing the independent author to do the same thing.
Level
They
the
can now
playing field,
pre-sell
yeah.
their book. Yeah.
We had an author on last week, or 2 weeks ago on our show, who actually is doing just that. Oksana.
Right.
She actually has an agent. She found a publisher, and they're pre-selling her book for her.
Oh,
That's
there you
cool.
go.
Now, Eric, you just for clarity, you say it's a donation, and it is literally and figuratively. This is not a tax-deductible donation, though, is it? Is it?
It's not. It's
Okay,
not because you're not a charitable organization.
Right,
and
not a
that's why.
C301 or whatever it is.
Right,
Right, got it. Okay.
But from a tax situation, although I should qualify by saying you should talk to your tax advisor, but from a tax situation, unless a single donor gives you more than $600 or $600 or more, you don't have to declare the money that you raise through the site as income.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the advantage as well. Like I know with Sonia's, we topped it off at 500.
Right.
And believe it or not,
Just
there
because
were
of that,
there were
probably,
a couple of people who gave.
Wow.
One gave 4 and one gave 5.
That's great.
So it's very realistic to do your book on a site like this. So, well, we're about to wrap up the show. I'm gonna let you know that on the next show, the topic is going to be writing music, and we're going to explore the techniques and what it takes to get published as a songwriter. My guest will be Nancy Abercrombie. And I would like to thank my guests, Kevin Parsons and Eric Bowman. You can find links and information about all my guests on the Aspects of Writing website at www.aspectsofwriting.com. Aspects of Writing broadcasts live every Monday at 9 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on KLAV, and on the internet at www.klav1230am.com. And we rebroadcast every Wednesday on VegasAllNetRadio.com at 8 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Future air dates and lineups can also be found at the www.aspectsofwriting.com website. Please sign our guest book while visiting Aspects of Writing, and you can post questions and comments on our guest book. And you can email us at aspectsofwriting@yahoo.com. Remember, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing right here on KLAV.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV every other Monday at 9 p.m. Your host, James Kelly, will bring you an informative look at every aspect of the writing industry. Guests on the show will share their experience and what inspired them to write. Together, we will explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and sell your work. So join us every other Monday for Aspects of Writing right here on KLAV.